Chapter 974. Heaven's Sword and Earth's Saber. Wan Qinglu and Bayushi paid no heed to Yun Yang's polite words, but it was not because they believed him or not. Their attention had long been drawn to the few people who were exhausted from training in the residence of Nine Supreme's drill ground. As far as their eyes could see, the 8 people in the field were all bruised and swollen, each of them looking battered and exhausted. There were even a few who were clutching their crotches and groaning. All in all, the situation was extremely dismal and unsightly. Perhaps due to the distance and the fact that the 8 people's senses were sealed, they naturally did not sense the presence of outsiders. However, Song Changgong and the other 3 men's gazes lingered on them for a long time. Although these people were old and dying, their experience and knowledge were still there. No matter how muddy their eyes were, it did not affect their vision. They all felt that the 8 of them were brimming with a kind of vitality that could soar to the sky. It was a vitality that had unlimited hope for the future. The 8 people were exhausted, bruised and battered and exhausted, but the feeling of hope moved the 4 of them. It was not that they had seen through the secret of the art of ultimate heaven and sensed it. It was because the vitality of the 8 people was what they needed and hoped for the most at the moment. The 4 people from the General Commerce League who came this time were all cultivators of the Supreme Saint level. Wan Qinglu and Bayushi were slightly stronger, but both of them had a rough sense of the end of their lives. In about a year and a half they would die completely. Heaven's Sword and Earth's Saber, on the other hand, were in an even more precarious situation. Their last bit of life was like a candle in the wind, about to die at any time. Perhaps if they closed their eyes now, it would be gone forever. In fact, these 2 old men had been in such a precarious state for several years. It was just that the General Commerce League had exhausted a lot of heaven and earth resources to barely keep them alive, but it was not a long-term solution after all. It was like trying to quench a fire with a cup of water. In fact, these 2 old men had been in such a precarious state for several years. It was just that the Merchant Union had used up a lot of heavenly treasures to barely keep them alive. But it was not a long-term solution after all. It was like trying to stop a boiling pot with a cup of water. If one had to describe these 2 old men who had made great contributions to the General Commerce League, it could only be, their lives were hanging by a thread. Many people in the Merchant Union were worried that they might lose their lives on the way here. Brother Yun, the Chi of Vitality. Lang Fantian went straight to the point, going straight to the main purpose of their trip. It was obvious that he was impatient to solve the problem. When Song Changgong and Li Yisin heard this, they turned their heads in unison. Wan Qinglu and Bayushi's eyes were filled with anticipation as well. Without further ado, Yun Yang extended his arm and said, "The air of vitality is sealed in my arm. As long as the seal is broken, it can be used, but I'm not sure how many people can use it. This is my first time bringing it out." Lang Fantian was overjoyed at the sight, leading the group into the meditation room in a hurry. Song Changgong, Li Yisin, Wan Qinglu, and Bayushi did not dare to be careless. One after another they confirmed the vitality in their arms. Their aged faces were filled with excitement. In the face of death, hope had suddenly appeared. Anyone would be wild with joy, and Song Changgong and the others were no exception. The deific consciousness energy that sealed the air of vitality was particularly ingenious, at least surpassing all the techniques that Song Changgong and the others knew of. They even suspected that even the elder-level experts of upper-class celestial luck banner sects might not be able to do such an ingenious sealing technique. What was even rarer was that such an ingenious technique could be broken at any time, as if it was only to ensure the existence of the air of vitality. The sealing technique itself is a miracle. Song Changgong sighed softly. As the group sighed, they fell into an awkward atmosphere of looking at each other. The air of vitality was right before their eyes. The 4 of them had proven that it was real, but the follow-up problem was still a daunting one. Who should they give the air of vitality to? Once the seal was broken, the air of vitality would appear. It would be better if there was a lot of it, but if it was only enough for one person, who should they give it to? Wan Qinglu and Bayushi seemed to be in great pain. In the end, they gulped and said with difficulty, "The 2 of us can hold on for at least another half a year. There's still some leeway. We can think of a way to gather the spiritual items in the following period of time and save it for the next deal. This time, Senior Song and Senior Li will go first." Having said that, both of them looked at each other and took a heavy step back, but their eyes were still glued to Yun Yang's arm. Yun Yang's evaluation of these 2 men was much higher after listening to them. Without reaching this point, it would be hard to understand just how great of a sacrifice and concession these 2 had made. Death was right before their eyes, but the hope of survival was right before their eyes, yet they were willing to give it up. This was no longer a matter of personal integrity, but a reflection of their affection. Everyone knew what the current situation was like. On the surface, as long as Yunyang was still here, as long as the League could gather a certain amount of heaven and earth resources, Yunyang could use them to trade. The chance of getting another portion of the air of vitality was not slim. However, the problem was not as simple as it seemed. Yunyang had made it clear that what he could get after entering the so-called spirit's grave was not up to him. Other than luck, there was an element of fluke to be able to obtain the air of vitality this time. What about the next time? Who could say for sure what would happen next time? Perhaps the life energy would only appear once and then never again. This might be the only chance for him to come into contact with the air of vitality. If he missed it, it would not come again. Would the people who were waiting not be completely at a loss then? Furthermore, the League had already expended a great deal of manpower, resources, and effort to gather the heaven and earth resources this time. Perhaps it could be gathered once or twice more in a short period of time, but it was impossible for them to gather all the quality resources to trade for too many times. When the next time came, perhaps, time waited for no man. Trembling, Song Changgong turned around slowly and bowed deeply to Wan Qinglu and Bayushi, saying, "Thank you, brothers." Chapter 975. Song Changgong and Li Yisin bowed to Wan Qinglu and Li Yisin for the second time. Both of them knew that this was not modesty. It was modesty, and it was at the risk of their lives. Even though they were not the ones in terms of seniority, if they had the slightest evil intention, the two brothers would not have been able to make it the 10,000 li journey. They would have died along the way. As long as they obtained the chi of life and got rid of the approaching limit of their lifespans, coupled with their status, cultivation, and strength, even if the Commerce Union wanted to pursue the matter, they would not be able to do so due to the circumstances. At this moment, this scene, this deep friendship could not be expressed in words, but it could only be engraved in their hearts. If they were to forget it for even a moment, they would not be human enough. "Brother, hurry up and open the seal. Use the chi of life." Song Changgong straightened and looked at Li Yisin. "Big brother, brother. The older brother comes before the younger brother. There's no reason for me to be the first to go. Big brother, please go first." Li Yisin's attitude was very firm. Song Changgong said coldly, "Ever since we became sworn brothers, I've been in charge of everything big and small. Since when was it your turn to make decisions? I told you to use it, so you must use it. Are you going to disobey your older brother?" Li Yisin laughed. "Why should there be any distinction between brothers? Big brother, I've obeyed you all my life, but I'm tired of it. How about I defy you today?" Song Changgong said sternly, "If you don't use it immediately, I'll kill myself on the spot. Do you think I wouldn't dare?" Everyone's hearts trembled, and their expressions became solemn. Li Yisin, however, was still calm. He said calmly, "If you don't use it, I won't use it either. At most, the two of us will go to the netherworld together. Wouldn't that be fulfilling what we said when we became sworn brothers? If we were not born on the same day, month, and year, we would rather die on the same day." Song Changgong's snow-white hair and beard trembled. He panted heavily. "Are you trying to anger me to death? I told you to use it first and give me the rest. Why are you so stubborn?" Li Yisin smiled and said, "Big brother, I'm actually 3 years younger than you. I still have time." Song Changgong was exasperated. They were brothers who had known each other for a long time. Their cultivations were similar and their ages were similar as well. Two people who had attained the cultivation of the Holy Venerables enjoyed a lifespan of 10,000 years. Was a mere 3 years of difference even considered a difference? As the two of them argued, Lang Fantian, Feng Guohai, and the others who were standing beside them were increasingly moved. These two old men had clearly reached the end of their lifespans and were on the verge of death. However, when faced with the huge temptation of choosing between life and death, they did their best to give this chance to live to the other. Lang Fantian sucked in a deep breath and said, "There's no need for this, High Reverends. Before I came, the chief privately gave me some treasured resources and told me solemnly that if the chi of vitality was real and effective, of course, we must further demonstrate the League's sincerity and ask for Brother Yun to enter again." Song Changgong and Li Yisin looked at each other. Song Changgong's wrinkled face smiled. "Brother, what are you worried about? Hurry up and use it." Li Yisin smiled in relief as well. That's right. Big brother, you really don't have to worry about me anymore." Both of them were still pushing each other to consume the chi of vitality. If I use this chi of vitality, what if my brother doesn't have it? So what if his vitality is restored and his lifespan is extended? Both of them were thinking the same thing. Yunyang had already been moved when he saw Wan Qinglu and Bayushi's generosity. Now that he saw these two old men who had stuck together through life and death, their unwavering brotherly bond in the face of the greatest temptation in the world, Yunyang was deeply touched. He interjected, "Seniors, there's no need to be so polite. It's a waste of time." In this junior's opinion, there's definitely hope for the second chi of vitality. Why do you think so? There must be a reason for Brother Yun to speak so confidently. Lang Fantian, Feng Guohai, and the others asked in unison. I've entered the spirit's grave many times, and while my knowledge of the situation within is still limited, I still have some understanding of it. For example, the first time I entered, I obtained the cultivation method and the method to enter the grave. The second time I entered, I began the bartering process. It was just that what I obtained in the beginning was only some spiritual ingredients and precious medicines that could aid in cultivation. This situation continued for a long time, until one time I entered and the treasures I obtained were exchanged for ethereal amethysts. Then, this junior's cultivation was successful and I reached the limit of the realm I was originally from. The senior who cultivated in the grave mentioned for the first time that he needed a higher level of heaven and earth treasure, mystical metals and metals. This was also the reason why I first transformed into the Raiders of All But God and started working with your league. Now that I think about it, the ethereal amethysts may be a rare item in this world, but they're only slightly precious in the spirit's grave. They're definitely not rare. Otherwise, the senior wouldn't have given me more than 100 ethereal amethysts that day. Feng Guohai was shocked and interrupted, "What? You have more than 100 ethereal amethysts?" Yunyang shook his head. Before I broke through the bottleneck of my cultivation base and ascended to the bound of universe, my cultivation base fell into a temporary stagnation. The senior who cultivated in seclusion gave me 100 ethereal amethysts at once because my cultivation base was stagnant and my search for spiritual ingredients and treasures wasn't effective, so he asked me to cultivate according to the method. My cultivation base skyrocketed in one go, surpassing the limit of my realm and ascending to the bound of universe. Lang Fantian and the others were struck with a sudden realization. Yunyang was young, only in his 20s, but he was already a saint. It was understandable if he was born in the bound of universe and had some background, but the truth was that he was merely a guest who had ascended from the lower realm. Such progress was terrifying. Now that they heard about his cultivation experience, their doubts were cleared. Lang Fantian cut him off and said, "Brother Yun, we're interested in your cultivation experience as well, but we're really not in the mood at this juncture. Can you get to the point quickly?" Yunyang chuckled. "We're about to get to the point. The ethereal amethysts were originally the best treasure given by the spirit's grave, but now that the chi of vitality has appeared, it's completely overshadowed. I'm afraid that there won't be a second chi of vitality. However, all of you have little contact with the spirit's grave. You don't know that the senior who cultivates in seclusion in the grave doesn't reject anyone in exchange for spiritual ingredients and mystical metals, the more the merrier. I believe that even if it's not as much as the ethereal amethysts, there should be a few more times." Yunyang said faintly, "According to my understanding of the spirit's grave, the chi of vitality has just appeared this time. There should still be a next time. The possibility is at least 90%. Instead of standing still, it's better to try it as soon as possible. There's no need to worry about nothing." The group was deep in thought. Wan Qinglu and Bayushi's eyes flickered. Both of them had gratified expressions on their faces, and they even heaved a sigh of relief. It was one thing to be virtuous and generous, but who would be willing to die if there was a chance to live as soon as possible? Li Yisin laughed and stood up. "All right, I'll guard Big Brother outside the door and wait for the next chance." Song Changgong finally heaved a long sigh as the group tried to persuade him. He glanced at the door exasperatedly and said angrily, "If it's gone, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. I'd rather die than live." Lang Fantian said seriously, "Don't worry, Senior Song. Brother Yun speaks with substance and confidence. Since there's hope before us, the League will send Brother Yun in again and again even if we have to go bankrupt, until we've obtained enough chi of vitality." He paused and said, "This is also a promise that Lord Chief has made a long time ago." Song Changgong heaved a long sigh, but Yunyang had already sat down in front of him. Yunyang's current cultivation base was still insufficient for him to argue with these people, but he had been with Emmy for a long time and was extremely sensitive to the fluctuation of life force. He could easily tell that Song Changgong was indeed the weakest among these people. His breath of vitality was so weak that it was almost non-existent. Li Yisin was weak as well, but he was still slightly stronger than Song Changgong. Yunyang was happy to verify the success of the chi of vitality and at the same time, he admired the two old men's brotherhood. He did not want the old man to bow his head and die just like that when there was a chance of survival before him. Song Changgong placed his hand on Yun Yang's arm and covered the deific consciousness seal with his deific consciousness. With a slight movement of his deific consciousness, it was already connected to the deific consciousness seal on his arm. Yun Yang activated the power of his deific consciousness at the same time. The chi of vitality began to slowly flow out from his arm. The group watched from the side. Song Changgong's body jerked abruptly as an excited flush rose on his aged face. And Chapter 976. The group could clearly feel that the secret chamber was suddenly filled with the rhythm of life. Everyone had already spread their deific consciousness to pay close attention to Yun Yang's arm. Now they could sense the air of vitality dripping from the seal on Yun Yang's arm. None of it was wasted. Song Changgong had absorbed it all and sent it into his meridians at once. A part of Lang Fantian's deific consciousness was wrapped around Song Changgong's body, so he could feel that Song Changgong's frail body was actually glowing with new life force. His dried meridians were softening bit by bit at a speed visible to the naked eye. The blood that had almost stopped flowing in his body began to flow once more. The most obvious change was the heart that had been beating slowly and weakly. Now it was beating rhythmically. As the air of vitality flowed faster into Song Changgong's body, Song Changgong, who was directly involved, could acutely feel the strength, youth, and vitality that he had long lost. These things that he could no longer retrieve were swiftly returning, regaining what he had lost. As the air of vitality continued to flow into his body, black and brown filth slowly seeped out of his body. It was the impurities that had blocked his meridians that were being expelled swiftly. The feeling filled him with the joy of a new lease of life. Enough! Song Changgong suddenly yelled for it to stop when the air of vitality was transferred halfway through. This old man has enough. There's still a lot left. Give it to my brother quickly. As he spoke, he struggled. This is enough for me to live. I can live for a long time. Stop it now. Yun Yang could only chuckle humorlessly and say in a low voice, this junior admires senior's sense of brotherhood, but this air of vitality can only be used by one person and it can't be stopped halfway. Now that I've personally come into contact with the air of vitality, I truly know what it is. The air of vitality is a life, a rhythm of life. There's a beginning and an end, a beginning and an end. Once it's stopped halfway, it's the same as cutting off a life from the middle. The air of vitality within the seal will dissipate while the ones that have entered your body will flow out. This is the death of the air of vitality. As the person directly involved, senior, do you really not know? Song Changgong was dumbstruck. But what about my brother? Where there's a will there must be a way. Yun Yang made a solemn vow, just for the sake of the two old sirs' deep friendship and unwavering loyalty, I'll take the initiative to request to bring out more of this air of vitality the next time I enter. Even if I have to pay a higher price, I'll bring out one more stream of air of vitality. Song Changgong heaved a slow sigh of relief and said, then I'll leave everything to you, young brother. The air of vitality was slowly injected into Song Changgong's body. In less than a quarter of an hour, the transfer was completed. Song Changgong did not move since some time ago, having entered a deep meditative state. His body was shrouded in a thick layer of fog, shrouding him in a dense white fog. He could not be seen at all. After a while, Lang Fantian and the others snapped out of their daze. When they lifted their heads, their gazes at Yun Yang were filled with an unprecedented fervor. This fervor was 10 times, perhaps 100 times more intense than before. It was especially so for Wan Qinglu and Bayushi. Their gazes were fixed on Yun Yang as if they wanted to swallow him whole. Yun Yang shuddered and said, wait patiently. I'm curious now as well. What kind of changes can this air of vitality bring to a person? However, as he stretched out his right arm, there was now an additional pattern filled with a profound meaning where the chi of life was originally sealed. There were still traces of the seal on his arm. It had not been completely removed. When he felt it again, it was no longer the same feeling as before. It was a sight to behold. It was unknown when Li Yisin had walked in. He looked at the thick white mist on Song Changgong's body with a face full of gratification. He felt the vigorous life force and his old face blossomed into a smile. He actually seemed to be in high spirits. Lang Fantian turned and said seriously, don't worry, elderly. I still have many precious treasures of heaven and earth here. The chief has said solemnly that if the air of vitality is real, then all of you must regain your youth no matter the cost. You won't be restrained by the limit of your lifespan. It won't be long. Li Yisin replied calmly, thank you for the chief's kindness, but I'm already satisfied. I dare not wish for more. He smiled and reminisced with satisfaction. Back then Big Brother and I were very lucky. We were able to join a lower-class Celestial Luck Banner sect when we first entered the martial world and were chosen as true disciples. Although the sect was annexed by other sects in the battle for the Celestial Luck Banner, both of us were taken in together and became disciples of a middle-class Celestial Luck Banner sect. Later on, we were chosen by a superior Celestial Luck Banner sect and became its disciple. We were taught a superior cultivation method and advanced together. Actually, Big Brother's luck has always been better than mine. It's just that he didn't have a good Big Brother like me. When we were at the middle-class Celestial Luck Banner, Big Brother was chosen first. He said, "I have a brother who's more talented than me." When we were at the upper-class Celestial Luck Banner, it was Big Brother who said, "I have a brother who's more talented than me." Just like that, we've always been together. Lee Yisin smiled softly. It's true. Even when the person in charge of the sect repeatedly stated that they're only taking in one disciple, Big Brother still said the same thing and insisted on bringing me along. People always say that a little bit of kindness leads to a little bit of enmity, but I think that's just an excuse for friendship without sincerity. Otherwise, if I didn't endlessly exploit Big Brother, I'd be harming him early on and achieving my own goals. Now that the Commerce League is able to help Big Brother regain his youth, I'm already grateful. Asking for more is really extravagant. Lee Yisin said, "Therefore, there are many people in the Merchant Union who have made great contributions, and they are not inferior to my brother. How can we abandon Fei Manduo and exhaust the Union's resources just for the sake of the two of us? It is unreasonable and we should not do so. Next time, even if there's still chi of vitality, you shouldn't consider me anymore." He chuckled softly and said, "Us brothers are getting a chance in our declining years. It's already too much. It's more than enough." The group fell silent when they heard him. Lee Yisin's words made a lot of sense. As the saying goes, the rarer something is, the greater its value. With the miraculous effects of the chi of life, it could be said to be a priceless treasure at the moment. The previous transaction, which was worth at least 400,000 upper-grade spiritual jades, was more of a test and confirmation. Obtaining the chi of life was a pleasant surprise. Song Changgong and the other three had come. While it was a fortuitous encounter for them, it was also an experiment to determine the effects of the chi of life and the number of times it could be used. Now that the effect of the chi of vitality had been proven and there would be chi of vitality in the future, even with Elder Song and Elder Li's contributions, taking 2 chances consecutively would attract a great deal of criticism. It was indeed unreasonable. In spite of it being unreasonable, it was not that they should not do so. This was something everyone was clear about. Lang Fantian thought about it for a long time before he spoke slowly and seriously. "Perhaps Elder Li thinks this is enough, but I don't think it's enough. The second deal must go through. If there's the chi of vitality, it'll be given to you, Elder Li. It's your business whether you want it or not, but it's our business whether we fight for it or not." Lee Yisin kept quiet for a long time before he said, "Big Brother has always been more perceptive than I am. This is probably the reason why we work for the General Commerce League." He smiled and said softly, "At least I didn't entrust myself to the wrong person in this life." He looked at Yun Yang and asked, "Brother Yun, do you understand what I'm saying?" Yun Yang thought about it carefully for a long time. He did not speak for a full quarter of an hour before he said seriously, "I think I do." Lee Yisin smiled with gratification in her eyes. She cracked open her toothless mouth and said, "I hope you can truly understand and be enlightened." Yun Yang's face was tinged with sorrow as he said, "I understand, but I probably can't do it." Lee Yisin chuckled meaningfully and said, "Those who admit they might not be able to do it usually manage to do it. Sometimes it's better not to do it even if you've tried your best." Yun Yang heaved a long sigh and said, "Yes." Lee Yisin heaved a sigh of relief and said, "It looks like you really do understand." This old man's words weren't wasted. Yun Yang did not speak. After a long time Yun Yang asked, "Senior Lee, we've only just met. Why are you telling me all this?" A warm smile hung on Lee Yisin's freckled face as he said, "A man's words are kind when he's about to die. It's just a saying, but when a man is about to die, he'll have some realizations and foresight that he doesn't usually have. Can you understand this?" Yin Yang nodded. Lee Yisin said, "I feel that I'll be staying in the residence of 9 Supremes for some time, perhaps for the rest of my life." He smiled and said, "Young brother Yun, these are the few sentences that I've summed up in my life. I feel that you're not bad. So, I hope that you can achieve great things. Of course, the most important thing is that I feel that you have hope." Lee Yisin's words to Yun Yang were vague throughout, but in a certain aspect they seemed to be very clear. Yun Yang felt that he seemed to have understood, but at the same time he did not. To Yun Yang, who prided himself on his intelligence and foresight, it was a very peculiar feeling. Lang Fantian, who was deep in thought, asked softly, then, "Senior Li, do you think that the General Commerce League, is it possible?" Li Yisin thought about it and said softly, "The General Commerce League? Just the word league is already too many ties." Lang Fantian's expression shifted slightly as he asked, "Too many ties?" "This is a good thing," said Li Yisin, "but it might not be a good thing either." Lang Fantian thought about it and asked, "Why do you think so?" Li Yisin's eyelids drooped. He did not answer for a long time. After a while he said, "The higher-ups are too sentimental." Lang Fantian did not understand and asked, "Sentimental? Is that a good thing?" Li Yisin, however, kept his mouth shut and did not say another word. Lang Fantian was indignant about it, but he could not listen to it any more. He pondered on his own, his brows increasingly tangled. After a long time he asked Yun Yang, "Brother Yun, isn't it a good thing to be sentimental?" "Of course it's a good thing," replied Yun Yang, stunned. Lang Fantian asked, Then why did elderly say that it's a tie?" Yun Yang sucked in a long breath and said, "It seems like, this isn't something that someone of my level can interpret." Lang Fantian was stunned as he murmured, "Sentimental and righteous are the foundation of the martial world." Yun Yang looked at him, his heart in turmoil. Sentimental and righteous were indeed the foundation of the martial world. However, sentimental and righteous were not the foundation of a hegemony. Looking at the General Commerce League's deputy chief, Yun Yang recalled the General Commerce League's chief's words, "At all costs." He also wanted the two high reverends to regain their youth. The promise was too great, too much. Then Yun Yang recalled everything that had happened since the establishment of diplomatic relations with the General Commerce League. Yun Yang understood what Li Yisin had said at once. Every sentence and word contained a deeper meaning. However, he could not explain it. The inexplicable feeling was filled with helplessness, making it even more inexplicable. As the thoughts flashed through his mind, Yun Yang suddenly realized something. The General Commerce Alliance was powerful and powerful. This was not an eyesore. It did not make sense for them to stop at the level of a middle-class celestial luck banner. Just the Supreme Saint experts alone, he had already seen 4 of them today and all of them were on the brink of death. How many Supreme Saint experts did the General Commerce League have in total? At the very least, the most conservative estimate would not be less than 10, right? Were there Saint Emperors of a higher level? It was highly possible that there were. However, such a powerful ability was only a middle-class celestial luck banner? Yun Yang did not want to think about it any further. If he were to think too deeply about it, it would be too hurtful and too much torture to his heart. As for Yun Yang, he did not want to damage his confidence in this aspect. If he lost his fighting spirit, the loss would outweigh the gain. Although this was the reality, it could not be erased no matter how cruel it was. Chapter 977. For a moment, no one spoke, sitting quietly in their seats as they waited. Everyone was preoccupied with their own thoughts. Lang Fantian did not speak for a long time. He sighed softly, his brows furrowed. Feng Guohai was much calmer, his eyes half-lidded while Xiao Yushu and the others looked thoughtful. Although Li Yisin's words were a bit vague, everyone heard it in their hearts and each of them had their own understanding. Some chose to voice it out loud while others kept it to themselves. The result caused the atmosphere to be heavy. After some time, a soft boom broke the tension. The thick white fog that everyone was fixated on dissipated abruptly. The group looked over instinctively. A collective gasp rang out. A handsome middle-aged man slowly stood up from the ground. The middle-aged man looked at Li Yisin excitedly and dashed over to hug him, crying out in ecstasy, "Brother, we have hope." At this moment, Lang Fantian and the others were all dumbstruck and tongue-tied. It was as if everyone's mind had turned into the fragments of a cosmic explosion. Song Changgong. This handsome middle-aged man was Song Changgong? It was the Song Changgong who looked old, wrinkled, white-haired, and had not long to live. At this moment, everyone felt like they were in a trance. Am I dreaming? How did Song Changgong recover to his youthful state in such a short amount of time? This is the Qi of Vitality. Had Song Changgong absorbed the Qi of Vitality and achieved this result? Thinking about it, everyone's gaze was focused on Yun Yang's face in unison. Their gazes were filled with fervent passion. They recalled at the same time, how did this miracle happen? What was the source of this miracle? Although everyone knew that Yun Yang had obtained the Qi of Vitality from the spirit's grave and had already spoken about its effects, they were still very excited. After all, it could prolong one's life and increase one's lifespan. It was extraordinary. It was not surprising that the user's condition would improve as a result. However, the outcome now was, Yun Yang had never mentioned that the qi of vitality could rejuvenate one's youth. Song Changgong hugged Li Yisin, hot tears streaming down his face. Li Yisin was also weeping. The two brothers had been companions for their entire lives. They had faced the wind and rain, faced life and death, faced the world of martial artists, and most importantly, faced each other. These two old men had been companions for longer than anyone else. Naturally, he had personally witnessed the struggle and hesitation of the other party. He had also personally witnessed the other party grow old along with him. This kind of feeling was indescribable. And now, Li Yisin had personally witnessed the miracle that had happened to her big brother. The joy she felt at this moment was simply incomparable. "Congratulations, big brother," Li Yisin said sincerely. He silently said in his heart, "After seeing this scene, even if I have no hope, or even if I die immediately, I can go on my way without any regrets." Because his brother had recovered to his peak state through this karma, he naturally had the ability to take care of himself. Even if he was not by his side, it was fine. Song Changgong's eyes were fixed on Li Yisin's head of white hair and the crisscrossing wrinkles. He said pitifully, "Brother, you'll be like big brother. I promise. No matter what price I have to pay, I'll restore your youth." He turned around and calmed his emotions. Facing Yun Yang, he bowed deeply in gratitude. "Brother Yun, thank you for the qi of vitality." Yun Yang returned the gesture quickly. "Elder Song is too courteous. It's a fair trade. I dare not accept Elder Song's thanks." Although Yun Yang was touched by the brotherly bond between these two elders and had even thought of lending a helping hand to Li Yisin, the occasion was not appropriate. If he were to accept Song Changgong's thanks, both parties' stances would inevitably change and would no longer be the same as they had been in the beginning. Therefore, Yun Yang was straightforward, attributing everything that had happened to them to a trade. Favors could exist in a trade, but they had to be viewed from a macro perspective. They could not be overly involved in personal feelings, or else it would be biased and disadvantageous. "I'm not being courteous." Song Changgong straightened himself and said seriously, "This old man knows your standpoint and attitude. I must thank the Commerce League as well, but to you this gratitude is unavoidable. This is especially so since this old man has a presumptuous request." Yun Yang looked at Song Changgong and then at Li Yisin, understanding dawning on him. "Brother Yun, I believe that you know what this old man is asking of. Just name your terms. No matter what they are, no matter the price, this old man will not hesitate to ask for your help." Song Changgong enunciated each word seriously. "My brother needs the qi of vitality as well." He straightened himself and said softly, "No matter the price, I can pay it." Yun Yang frowned and said, "Yun Yang has seen and appreciated the friendship between Elder Song and Elder Li, but when it comes to helping with the qi of vitality, I can only promise to do my best to help both of you. I can't guarantee anything. After all, this is not something that I can decide." Song Changgong said, "Of course. This old man thanks Brother Yun for being willing to lend a helping hand." Yun Yang thought about it for a moment and said faintly, If I can't get it successfully, or if I'm delayed." Li Yisin's expression darkened. Yun Yang's words seemed to be stating the pros and cons, but it was obvious that he was testing their brotherly bond. Even if he did not have malicious intentions, he must have an ulterior motive, an impure one. "Big brother." Before Song Changgong could speak, Li Yisin had already spoken up. "Big brother, life and death are decreed by fate. It can't be forced. It's my fortune to get it, but it's my fate to lose it." Song Changgong shook his head, his eyes filled with warmth as he looked at his brother. After a while, he smiled faintly and turned to face Yun Yang again. Suddenly, he raised a hand and said, "I, Song Changgong, swear to the heavens that if my brother can't regain his youth, then both of us brothers will live and die together, come and go together." With a loud boom, thunder boomed in the air. The vow was made. It was a vow made to heaven's way. Li Yisin had never expected Song Changgong to make such a decision. He could not help trembling as he froze, tears streaming down his face. "Big brother, you..." His voice was choked, unable to speak. Since the vow had been made, it was too late to dissuade him. It was meaningless. Song Changgong smiled faintly. "You and I are brothers. This is how it is. The promise of brotherhood in the past is still ringing in my ears. The qi of vitality that I've obtained today was given to me by you. If you can't get it, why should I stay in the mortal world alone? We've roamed the martial world together for tens of thousands of years. We've been together for so many years. If you really leave first, do you really have the heart to let me suffer in loneliness and silence for a long time with guilt? Chapter 978. Lang Fantian and the others were stunned as well. The shock they were feeling was indescribable. They stared at the two brothers dumbfoundedly, their gazes suddenly brimming with admiration. They had always known that these two old men had supported each other throughout their lives, that their brotherly bond was deep, that they were extremely close, and that they would go through life and death together. However, they did not expect their brotherly bond to be so earth-shattering that it would last through life and death. One had given up when faced with the hope of regaining his youth. The other had regained his youth but was willing to give it up for his brother. This was such a sincere brotherly love. Wan Qinglu and Bayushi exchanged a glance and saw the shame in each other's eyes. The hardest person to deceive was none other than himself. He asked himself honestly, if such an opportunity were to fall in front of him, would he be like these two people and give it up on a silver platter? Both of them shook their heads silently and bitterly. Perhaps it was because they were not close enough, perhaps it was a coincidence, but the most important thing was, I've never had such a brotherly bond. Vice Chief Lang? Song Changgong turned to Lang Fantian and said, I'm afraid we brothers will have to stay in the residence of 9 Supremes for some time. Lang Fantian nodded readily. Don't worry, Elder Song. Leave it all to me. He thumped his chest loudly. Lang Fantian was a brute, but he was not an idiot since he was the vice chief of the General Commerce League. He could see clearly now that Song Changgong had indeed fully recovered, and he had regained his peak third-level Supreme Saint's ability when he was at his peak. It was real. The ability was secondary. What mattered most was that he had gained at least a few thousand years of cultivation time from now on. With his cultivation and experience, no one could tell what level he could reach in the future. However, there was no doubt that he would be stronger than he was now. If he could get Song Changgong to owe him a huge favor now, how much of an investment would that be? Even if he could not owe him a favor, he could at least forge a friendship. It would be a worthwhile investment. Moreover, if the favor was achieved, it would not be just Song Changgong alone, but Li Yisin, who had regained his youth, would also be included. He would be profiting immensely. It was equivalent to having 2 more backers at the highest level of the General Commerce Alliance. On the other hand, Yun Yang's refusal and procrastination would not earn him a favor. Not only would he offend both of them, the most direct outcome would be the General Commerce League losing the 2 elders, Song Changgong and Li Yisin. Once Li Yisin passed away, Song Changgong would be buried with him, going to the Netherworld together. This outcome would mean that the General Commerce League's deal with Yun Yang would all be for naught. It would be a complete loss, a futile effort. Calculating in this way, he naturally had to pat his chest and guarantee that he would do his best to make this happen. Song Changgong's handsome face was filled with kindness as he said, Thank you, Deputy Chief Lang. Before his words echoed in the air, he took off his spatial ring and passed it to Lang Fantian along with Li Yisin's spatial ring, saying slowly, These are our lifetime savings. If it's not enough to exchange for Brother Yun's chance to enter the spirit's grave again, I hope that Vice Alliance Master Lang can help gather some. Then he smiled and said apologetically, Everyone, we brothers have something private to talk about. Brother Yun, please prepare a quiet room for us. Thank you. Yun Yang made the arrangements without a second thought. Please go ahead, both of you. Song Changgong supported Li Yisin and left slowly. Everyone stared at the duo's retreating silhouettes, their gazes filled with shock and gratitude. Without a doubt, Song Changgong had gone to comb through Li Yisin's meridians. Li Yisin's current condition could no longer be nourished by mere external items, but with Song Changgong's recovered ability of a third-grade Supreme Saint, combing through his brother's body with all his might, there would be a certain effect. Moreover, both of them understood each other so well, knowing each other's ability level and physical flaws. Under such conditions, as long as the Chi of Vitality could still be obtained, Li Yisin could definitely wait with Song Changgong's support. Everyone believed that Song Changgong would buy enough time for Li Yisin even if he had to risk his life. When the crowd turned to look at Yun Yang again after Song Changgong and Li Yisin left, their expressions were unprecedentedly passionate. Brother Yun? Lang Fantian's face was flushed with excitement. This Chi of Vitality is amazing. It's truly amazing. Feng Guohai and the others' eyes were shining as well, their faces flushed and their words incoherent as if they were drunk. Even the 2 Supreme Saint experts, Bayushi and Wan Qinglu, were overwhelmed with excitement. As the saying went, seeing was believing. No matter what Yun Yang had said or how they had observed with their deific consciousness, it was nothing compared to the effect of having someone personally experience the Chi of Vitality. Now that it was being used on a dying man like Song Changgong, it could be said that the effect of the qi of vitality was being displayed to the fullest. It was truly astounding, breathtaking. As for the qi of vitality that Yun Yang had provided, it was not an exaggeration to say that it could receive any kind of praise after such an effect. Vice Chief Lang. Feng Guohai coughed and shot Lang Fantian a look. Let us discuss the pricing of the qi of vitality first. I wonder what the headquarters thinks of the qi of vitality? Do you have a price in mind? He tilted his head and glanced at Yun Yang, saying with a smile, I believe that Brother Yun values this the most. Lang Fantian was hit with a sudden realization. Yes, of course, it was as if he had just woken up from a dream. The situation was obvious. Yun Yang's qi of vitality had been brought out and its effects had been proven. It was already a high-quality product. As long as it was a product, it should have a price. It was especially so now that they were discussing the next time they would bring out the qi of vitality. If the price they offered did not match the other party's price, the other party would not bring it out anymore. What should they do? Therefore, the price had to be set carefully and it had to be set high instead of low. Lang Fantian only thought about it before he made up his mind. He said honestly, before I came, the League headquarters did consider the qi of vitality. Now, however, the initial consideration is no longer the main point. I'll just speak the chief's opinion. Just like what Feng Guohai had said, Yun Yang was indeed concerned about the pricing of the qi of vitality. Lang Fantian said, the chief said that, as long as the qi of vitality is real and effective, we're willing to offer a price of 1,000,000 upper-class spiritual jade pieces according to the highest treatment. Once Lang Fantian spoke, Feng Guohai subconsciously sucked in a cold breath. 1,000,000 upper-class spiritual jade pieces. 10,000 lower-class spiritual jade pieces equaled 1 upper-class spiritual jade piece. 1,000,000 upper-class spiritual jade pieces equaled 10 billion lower-class spiritual jade pieces. A whole 10 billion lower-class spiritual jade pieces. The lower-class spiritual jade pieces were the most common currency in the bounded universe. Chapter 979. The resources given by the League last time will be priced according to the normal market price. Lang Fantian finished his discussion with Feng Guohai and said, it's about 600,000 pieces of upper-class spiritual jade. According to the original agreement, we'll offer superior heaven and earth resources and mystical metals in exchange for Brother Yun's gains from the spirit's grave this time. However, the qi of vitality is too precious. Brother Yun will suffer a great loss if the deal is really carried out. Therefore, if Brother Yun has no objections to the pricing, the League will owe Brother Yun 400,000 pieces of upper-class spiritual jade or items worth 400,000 pieces of upper-class spiritual jade. Brother Yun, what do you think of the deal? Do you have any objections? Speak your mind. Lang Fantian asked cautiously. The current situation was completely different from before. The qi of vitality that Yun Yang offered was miraculous and the quantity was scarce. Naturally, he was the stronger party, and Lang Fantian's attitude was much more humble. I basically have no objections. Yun Yang agreed after a moment of consideration. The other party had offered the highest price for the qi of vitality, while the General Commerce Alliance had offered the middle price for the other goods. In this case, the difference in the middle was already a huge sum. No matter how one looked at it, the General Commerce League was sincere in this deal. To be fair, the deal had already been agreed upon earlier. The bargaining chip was a one-time supply of resources in exchange for Yun Yang's earnings from the spirit's grave. Now that the spirit's grave had given out items that had greatly exceeded their expectations, it was also because of the Commerce League's good foresight. It was understandable that they did not compensate Yun Yang for the difference. Now that they had taken the initiative to offer to compensate the difference, it was a sign of more goodwill and sincerity. Yun Yang was even more impressed. This General Commerce League's chief is truly a character. Just this boldness alone is enough to make people admire him. No wonder he was able to establish such a huge foundation for the General Commerce Alliance. Then, Brother Yun, do you want spiritual jade or resources for the difference in price? Asked Lang Fantian. Yun Yang thought about it and said, 100,000 pieces of upper-class spiritual jade and 300,000 pieces of heaven and earth resources. What do you think, Vice Chief Lang? Alright, it's a deal then. Lang Fantian answered without hesitation. He then opened his spatial ring and rummaged through it, storing the items he had picked up in another spatial ring and passed it to Yun Yang. Brother Yun, there are 100,000 upper-class spiritual jade pieces and 300,000 upper-class spiritual jade pieces worth of heaven and earth resources in here. Shopkeeper Feng explained it to Brother Yun. Brother Yun hasn't been in the Xinhuang world for long, so he might not know everything. Feng Guohai nodded. Very well, it's a given. Both of them were unperturbed, scanning the items roughly on the spot. Feng Guohai studied the treasures given by Lang Fantian with ease, listing out their origins one by one. In the end, he concluded that there were 300,000 of them, a little more than that, amounting to about 320 and 30,000. Yin-Yang called Little Fatty over as well. Little Fatty roughly estimated the total value of these heaven and earth resources to be around 340,000, perhaps a little more. Strictly speaking, the difference between the two men's valuation was obvious. There was at least a difference of 10,000 upper-class spiritual jade pieces. It was a huge sum of wealth, but Feng Guohai had obviously underestimated the total price. It further displayed the General Commerce League's sincerity. It was as good as it could get. They were afraid that any unpleasantness would disrupt the subsequent collaboration. With this kind of attitude and resources, everyone was naturally happy with the situation. Based on the current situation, the price for entering this time had already been paid. It was the 3 superior spiritual herbs and more than 10 pieces of mystical metals. The additional 400,000 upper-class spiritual jade pieces now was no different from Yun Yang's personal reward. Perhaps, it was the commission that the General Commerce League had given to Yun Yang. Yes, it was the profit from this transaction. In spite of it, a commission of 4 billion lower-class spiritual jade pieces had already exceeded the level of extravagance. It was simply outrageous. Yun Yang had the intention to return the favor, so he stopped while he was ahead. This batch of heaven and earth resources will be calculated at 300,000. It's equivalent to receiving 30,000 upper-class spiritual jade pieces in advance for the next transaction. Lang Fantian and the others agreed to it after a few rounds of pleasantries. It was a happy ending. Yin Yang knew it very well. The reason they were so courteous was entirely because of the spirit's grave. Perhaps, it was because of the deific consciousness suppression and the deific consciousness seal. They were too afraid of the deific consciousness inside. This was the reality that should be expected. If he did not have such a trick, he would have been captured long ago and would not be able to escape for the rest of his life. The talent of the ethereal physique was rare, perhaps unique, but it was not irreplaceable. At least, it was far from being comparable to the benefits of the spirit's grave. Being able to activate the spirit's grave was his biggest trump card to save his life. In spite of it, it was one thing for the other party to be wary, but it was another for them to be able to trade fairly and respectfully. Although he had the upper hand, he could not go overboard. Otherwise, it would not be good if the pleasant collaboration turned sour. If so, Brother Yun, when do you plan to enter again? Lang Fantian's usually composed face was tinged with impatience. Wan Qinglu and Bayushi's eyes were burning as well. The significance of entering again this time was different from the previous time. The implications were too great. Li Yisin was not the only one who desperately needed the chi of vitality. Both of them needed it as well. We don't have many years left, Feng Guohai asked on their behalf. Can we go in again now? Yun Yang chuckled humorlessly. Elder Feng, how could you even ask such a question? Feng Guohai chuckled awkwardly as well. He understood everything but the others did not. Theoretically speaking, it's possible to go in now. Yun Yang said helplessly but honestly, after all, the senior in the spirit's grave desperately needs these things as well. From this point alone, the more frequently we enter, the more welcome he'll be. However, if we go in now and bring enough heavenly materials and earthly treasures with us, and the time between the 2 visits is so short, and the resources we give out are so excellent that they are far better than before, it's inevitable that the other party will feel that it's too easy for us to collect these things, and it'll inevitably reduce the benefits of the transaction. Yun Yang said, it's already a great disadvantage to lower the profit. What's more, if the senior inside sets a fixed deadline for the transaction, then we'll be too passive. Even if the deadline isn't set, we'll only have to raise the price of the transaction and it'll become more difficult for us. I believe that there's a limit to the resources your league can collect. Based on this premise, I hope that the price of the items to be traded in the future won't increase due to impatience. Yun Yang said sincerely, therefore the premise of our request should be a long-term collaboration. If it becomes difficult or even a predicament, we'll be neglecting the essentials and the future will be uncertain. Also, while the chi of vitality is precious and effective, there aren't many seniors like Elder Song, Elder Li, and Wan Bai who are limited by their lifespans in the league. I believe the Commerce League won't focus all of its attention on the chi of vitality, will it? I think there might be something better than the chi of vitality in the spirit's grave. Blindly acquiring the qi of vitality will consume too many resources. If we don't have the resources to exchange for something better. Chapter 980. Lang Fantian, Feng Guohai, and the others were members of the General Commerce League. To be able to hold such high positions, they were naturally well versed in business. How could they not know that Yun Yang's words were extremely reasonable? He was not only considering for himself, but also considering the pros and cons of both parties. He was truly sincere. Brother Yun does make sense. Lang Fantian said candidly, we've been overly concerned about the magical effects of the qi of vitality. We've been a little too hasty. He thought about it and could not help asking, then, how often do you think we should enter? The next time we enter, it's best if we prepare 20% more items than this time. Yun Yang stated his conditions and said after some thought, as for the time to enter, we'll have to wait for half a month, even if it's the fastest. And this time could be said to be very tight. We can't shorten it any further. He emphasized, the next time we enter, it'll be best if we can extend the time for the next one. Half a month. Is it too long? Lang Fantian mused. This is already the shortest time. It's longer than the interval between each time I enter the spirit's grave. Yun Yang said decisively, there's one more thing I have to make clear. Perhaps after a few more times, the items that must be traded will require the power of providence other than heaven and earth treasures, upper-class spiritual jade and mystical metals. He chuckled humorlessly and spread his arms. To be honest, my original plan was to slow down the frequency of my entry into the spirit's grave as much as possible while speeding up the construction of the sect, hoping to obtain a certain amount of providence in the buffer period. My residence of 9 Supremes has only just been built. How far away from obtaining the providence is it? If I can't provide the necessary items by then, I'm afraid I'll be disqualified from the trade. It'll be too late for regrets then. Due to this crucial point, we have to leave some buffer time for ourselves so that the sect can have room to develop. At the very least, we have to be qualified to compete for the providence. Only then can we talk about a longer term. Lang Fantian mused and said slowly, Brother Yun, makes sense. On the other side, the 5 people from the General Commerce League nodded in agreement as well. According to the usual pattern, Yun Yang should follow up his victory and further expand his gains. When doing business, who didn't know the principle of striking while the iron was hot? In spite of this, Yun Yang did the exact opposite. Not only was he not in a hurry, he was even advising others not to be in a hurry as well. With such a stance, the crowd couldn't help but be more convinced about the exchange of the spirit's grave. Instead, he began to admire Yun Yang. If he had been in Yun Yang's position, he might not have been able to do better and be more clear-headed under the onslaught of huge benefits. This was the clear-headedness that a person who wanted to do great things should have. If he blindly sought instant benefits and drained the pond, he might not be able to exchange for anything one day. If he really couldn't even enter the spirit's grave, he might not even be able to enter it. That would truly be a disaster. Yun Yang's personal safety was irrelevant, but the General Commerce League's hope of soaring would become a castle in the air, unsustainable. Brother Yun has great foresight and is prepared for danger in times of peace. We are impressed, the crowd said in unison. Half a month then? Lang Fantian said, with the resources I've brought this time, it'll be enough for 3 to 4 exchanges based on the amount of this exchange. He sighed. Just like what Brother Yun said, there's a limit to the resources that the General Commerce League can collect. I've brought half of the General Commerce League's tens of thousands of years' worth of reserves this time, but this accumulation can't even support a few exchanges. If we're really eager for instant benefits, it's indeed unwise and foolish. Don't worry, Vice Chief Lang. We brothers will do our best. As long as we're willing to seek for these resources, there's still a lot that can be done in this vast world. Wan Qinglu and Bayushi were suddenly filled with confidence, their eyes gleaming brightly. Both of them had made up their minds. If it really didn't work out, they would steal or rob. No matter what, they had to get more of these resources. Heaven and earth treasures. Were they not abundant in the entire continent? Even if it was for the sake of their reputation, they could still conceal their faces. So it's decided. Half a month later, we'll go in for another exchange, Yun Yang said decisively. Very well. Lang Fantian was a straightforward man. He was never one to drag his feet, so he said decisively, if that's the case, the 5 of us will leave first and return to the headquarters. For the sake of our future plans, we must explain this to the chief and make a decision. Yun Yang nodded in understanding. Wan Qinglu and Bayushi were actually rather reluctant about this, but there was nothing they could do. They had to return. Only when they returned and reported the matter would they be able to verify it completely. Once the higher-ups were of one mind, the matter would be easier to handle. Moreover, it was Lang Fantian, Xiao Yushu, Gu Jiuxiao, and Feng Guohai who had reported the matter from beginning to end. The four of them were, of course, in the same boat. How could they let the four of them verify it again? Both of them were the true eyewitnesses. Who would go back if they did not? As for Song Changgong, he had to stay here to take care of Li Yisin. No one dared to disturb him. Asking Song Changgong to return was, of course, the most persuasive thing to do, but who would be willing to do so? Li Yisin's life was at its end. He could die at any time. If Li Yisin were to die before Song Changgong returned, who could withstand Song Changgong's wrath? This was not a risk they could take. As for asking Song Changgong to return with Li Yisin, the group thought about it and decided that it was best not to even mention the possibility. If they did, they might be blasted into minced meat by Song Changgong on the spot. Farewell. Lang Fantian cupped his fists and reminded, Brother Yun, you must work hard too. There's less than half a year left before the battle for the lower-class Celestial Luck Banner. I wish you the right to challenge for the Celestial Luck Banner's ownership. Lang Fantian was not at all worried about Yun Yang's establishment of a sect and did not ask about it at all. What does the speed of a newly established sect have to do with me? As for seizing the Celestial Luck Banner, TSK, are you dreaming? Is the Celestial Luck Banner so easy to obtain? Now, however, Lang Fantian was more concerned about the matter than anyone else. He was even more concerned than Yun Yang, the residence of 9 Supremes. He even wanted to fight for the residence of 9 Supremes himself. The outcome of obtaining the Celestial Luck Banner was too crucial. There must be no mishap. Yun Yang nodded. Don't worry. He thought, I'm more anxious than you are, and... Chapter 981. It was one thing for Yun Yang to be confident, but how could the General Commerce League be at ease? The situation of the residents of 9 Supremes was almost clear at a glance. There were only 2 or 3 of them, and their top combat force could barely fight the last few higher-ups of the lower-class Celestial Luck Banners. However, as long as the other side brought out their top combat force or even their combined combat force to fight, the residents of 9 Supremes would be no match for them. The disciples you've recruited are obviously of poor aptitude and are not worthy to be brought to the table at all. There were many battles to be fought for the Celestial Luck Banners, including a one-on-one battle between their top combat force. Most of the battles were fought by the strongest experts of each sect. Then, there was the battle between the top combat force between the 2 sections. Basically, there were 3 matches, but a few of them were decided according to the situation at the time. Then, there were the battles between the core disciples. There were at least 5 matches on this floor, and if no one fought, it would be considered as a defeat. Besides, there was also the final battle of formations, which was a comprehensive battle strategy that gathered the elite combat force of each sect. It went without saying that the sect would turn out in full force. Therefore, although there were 4 rounds of battles in name, the actual number of matches was more than 10. The core disciple battles were usually decided by winning 3 out of 5 matches. As the challenger, only by winning this match would they have the qualifications to enter the next stage of the battle between the top disciples. The battle of the top combat force was usually best of 3 out of 3, and the challenger would only be qualified to enter the next battle of the top combat force if it won this match. If it did not win, it would immediately lose the qualification to challenge the next battle. Then, there was the battle of formations. There were no strict requirements for this battle, and both the winner and the loser could enter the final battle of the top. However, the battle of formations had always been the one with the most casualties in the 4 rounds of battles. As the saying went, injuring 1,000 enemies while injuring 800 was especially applicable here. Basically, after this round, both the challenger and the Banner Guardian sect would suffer heavy losses and be greatly weakened. In the final battle of the top, the opponents were usually the strongest combat force of the sect, putting an end to the battle of the Celestial Luck Banners. As long as one could obtain 3 victories in the flag battle, one would be able to challenge the Celestial Luck Banner of the target, but only a newly ascended sect that won all 4 battles would have the opportunity to challenge the next sect. If one could only win 3 out of 4 battles, he would only be qualified to advance to the last place in the lower-class Celestial Luck Banner. If one wanted to advance further, he would have to wait for 3 years before he could fight again. In other words, if he could keep winning all 4 battles, he would be able to keep advancing, as long as the interval between each victory was less than 3 months. So, theoretically, it was possible to obtain many Celestial Luck Banners in a short period of time. However, the problem now was that the residence of 9 Supremes was too weak. At least, in the eyes of Lang Fantian and the others, Yun Yang's residence of 9 Supremes had no hope of winning any of the battles. Winning a single battle was already an extravagant hope, let alone obtaining the Celestial Luck Banner, winning all 4 battles and continuously challenging the sects with Celestial Luck Banners that ranked higher than them. Although the cultivation base of Shi Wuchen and his companions was extraordinary, they were at most core disciples in the top few sects with lower-class Celestial Luck Banners. There were only a few days left before the Battle of the Celestial Luck Banners began. Could they really make another breakthrough in such a short time? Even if 1 or 2 of them were lucky enough to achieve a breakthrough, it was impossible for all of them to achieve a breakthrough and gain the qualification to pull down Kangwu Union, the last sect with the lower-class Celestial Luck Banner. Lang Fantian left worriedly. "I'll be back in 7 days at most." Lang Fantian and the others sprung up and soared into the sky, speeding toward the southern sky. Song Changgong and Li Yisin stayed in the residence of 9 Supremes. Song Changgong was well behaved, staying in the small yard that Yun Yang had given him, not leaving the house at all. Of course, the main reason for his well-behaved behavior was because of his brother. From morning to night, he had been using his refined mystical qi to nurse his sworn brother's meridians. The work was done almost day and night without any signs of fatigue. Li Yisin tried to dissuade him from doing so, but Song Changgong ignored him completely, taking care of his own affairs. "I hope that it belongs to 2 people, not just 1. Song Changgong was stubborn. "If only one of us can have it, why don't we both just give it up and go to the netherworld together? We brothers can't do anything earth-shattering, but this brotherhood can't be blasphemed, tainted, or killed. Even if it's for each other." On the second morning after Lang Fantian and the others left, the last 2 members of the Demiurge Flawed 10, Wu Menghuan, the purple-robed Golden Needles, and Luo Dajiang, the star-souled Saber Man, arrived at the residence of 9 Supremes. The Demiurge Flawed 10, the 10 legendary ultimate whetstones, had not been gathered so neatly for a long time. Now, they had finally gathered in the residence of 9 Supremes after such a long time. It was not just Yun Yang, even the 10 of them felt a sense of awe that they had not felt for a long time. The reason why Wu Menghuan and Luo Dajiang had arrived so late was not only because they had traveled the furthest, but also because they had brought their families along. Before they came, they did not seem to have considered whether the residence of 9 Supremes would accept them. The 2 groups of carriages met in front of the residence of 9 Supremes mountain gate. Wu Menghuan leaped down from the carriage and stared at the residence of 9 Supremes mountain gate with a distant gaze, not moving for a long time. On the other side, Luo Dajiang did the same. Both of them saw each other's arrival, but it was as if they did not see each other. After a while, Luo Dajiang sighed softly. "It looks like you've made up your mind." "Yes, you've made up your mind too," Wu Menghuan replied quietly. Both of them were still not looking at each other, but they were smiling as they spoke. "Since Shi Wuchen and the rest are here, I believe the residence of 9 Supremes, the 10 Supremes home, won't disappoint us," Wu Menghuan continued. "Even if we're disappointed, it'll only be the last time." Luo Dajiang's expression was as calm as still water, and so was his tone. "We've been lacking the opportunity to join a sect for so many years, but the result of joining it is only disappointment and humiliation again and again," Wu Menghuan said. "We've endured too much of such humiliation before, so we don't mind it anymore. However, if the recommendation from us, the Demiurge Flawed 10, ends up in the same situation, I'm afraid I won't be able to take it." Luo Dajiang was silent for a moment before he murmured, "I hope we can really have a shelter this time. Is such a wish really that extravagant?" "It is truly extravagant." Both of them still did not look at each other, but they strode forward at the same time. "Please announce that purple-robed Golden Needle Wu Menghuan and Star Soul Saber Man Luo Dajiang have come to join the mountain gate." Chapter 982. As a thick white mist rapidly emerged, an equally thick aura of spiritual energy suddenly appeared. Yun Yang appeared with a smile. "Brothers, you're finally here. Yun Yang and the others have been waiting anxiously. Please, come in quickly." At this moment, in this instant, the 2 of them only felt that their hearts, which were originally hanging in mid-air, suddenly calmed down in front of this smiling face, and their hearts immediately warmed up. Wu Menghuan cupped his fists and said, "How dare I trouble Head Supreme Yun to welcome us personally? Where are Shi Wuchen and the rest?" Yun Yang's smile grew more affectionate. "They're all training. I guess they're all unconscious now. It's all right, come in first. He's been drilled to the point where he's unconscious, right?" These words, why did they sound so horrifying? Was the residence of 9 Supremes not a newly established sect? Yun Yang, Chief Supreme Yun, the founder of the Residence of Nine Supremes, had a mediocre cultivation base. What kind of expert could there be in the sect to train Shi Wuchen and the others? It was baffling. At the same time it was terrifying. Wu Minghuan and Luo Dajiang entered the Residence of Nine Supremes Mountain Gate in bewilderment. Behind them, their family members looked around curiously at the various buildings within the Residence of Nine Supremes Mountain Gate. Both of them were determined to go all out on this trip, bringing along all their parents and family members, including Wu Minghuan's parents and two younger sisters. Other than his parents, Luo Dajiang also brought along a stubborn girl dressed in red. "Brother Luo, may I ask who this lady is?" Yun Yang was rather puzzled. "I'm Jiang Luo Luo." The girl in red pouted and said, "Jiang Luo Luo, the reverse of Luo Dajiang's name with de removed." Yun Yang coughed. "Oh, sorry for the disrespect." Was this an explanation of her background or her name? It seemed very puzzling and thought-provoking. "Luo Dajiang is my fiancé. We were betrothed when our families were young, but now that my parents are gone, Luo Dajiang doesn't want to acknowledge it and wants to abandon me." Jiang Luolua's tears fell. "I can't find anyone to stand up for me, and I don't know how to punish this heartless person. I can only follow him. I want to see how this heartless person ends up." Luo Dajiang almost vomited blood. "Luo, can you be a little more reasonable? How am I abandoning you? Haven't you suffered enough humiliation in the days you've been with me? You're a disciple of a mid-level celestial luck banner sect. You have a bright future ahead of you, so why bother to follow a person with a dim future like me? Seeing me being used as a whetstone by those people every day, humiliated and toyed with after using me? Could it be that when a woman looks for a husband she has to look for someone like me? How can there be a future?" Jiang Luolua's eyes were filled with stubbornness as she said, "There's no use saying all these useless things. My parents promised me to you back then. If they were still alive, it's fine if you don't want me. I can still ask them to retract their promise. But they're all gone. Where can I find them to take back their orders? Can't a man like you be more responsible? I'm not asking you to be indomitable, but can you keep your word for once? So what if you were humiliated? So what if he had used it and played with it? This is God's test for you. I'm sure you'll achieve great things in the future. You, Luo Dajiang, obviously feel that you'll be great in the future, so you want to dump me in advance. You despise me. You abandoned your wife, you're shameless. Sup?" Luo Dajiang's face turned red, helpless. "I'm not that kind of person." "Then why don't you marry me?" "How can I marry you like this?" "Stop fooling around." "Why am I fooling around? You're the one who wants to be a heartless person. You're making a false accusation." "I'm not. How am I a heartless person? I didn't do anything." "You are. You are. The girl's eyes glistened with tears as she said repeatedly, "You are." "Leave now?" Luo Dajiang looked conflicted. "I'm no longer alone. When your sect comes looking for me again, it won't just involve me this time, but so many of my brothers are here. Do you want me to implicate my brothers?" The girl glared at him. "As long as you marry me and have a status, I'll leave. Is that all right?" Yun Yang looked at the valiant girl in front of him and could not stop praising her. This girl was truly a model. He had already thought that Ji Lingxi was very valiant, a tomboy, and Shengguan Lingxiu was full of valiance and heroism. However, compared to Jiang Luo Luo, they were immediately at a disadvantage. She was too graceful, too King valiant. Luo Dajiang heaved a long sigh, a hint of tenderness flashing across his eyes. Luo Dajiang was not a fool. How could he not know the girl's feelings? However, it was precisely because he knew that his current situation would only result in him dragging her down, harming her, and tarnishing her reputation. If he really married her, it would be an irreversible disaster for Jiang Luo Luo. The name of the Demiurge Flawed 10 was still very threatening. No one dared to touch Jiang Luo Luo now, mainly because the eldest senior brother, the leader of her sect, was fond of her. In terms of status alone, the eldest senior brother's position was naturally far from that of Lang Fantian, elder Li Yixin and guardian Wan Qinglu, but he was on par with Feng Guohai. Naturally he was a person of high status and power. He would not lose his poise on the surface, nor would he allow anyone to touch Jiang Luo Luo. Once they were married, however, what was done could not be undone. The senior brother's dream would be shattered, and he would definitely fly into a rage. Jiang Luo Luo would no longer be able to stand in her sect under this rage. Her safety would be threatened and her life would be at risk. It was not a joke. "Are you leaving or not?" Luo Dajiang hardened his heart, his expression turning cold. Jiang Luoluo burst into tears at once and said loudly, I know what you're worried about. I understand. As long as you marry me, I won't go back. I'll stay and not go anywhere. I'll only be your mistress in the inner residence. Luo Dajiang sucked in a deep breath, his face livid. You have a great future ahead of you. You're a true disciple of a middle-class celestial luck banner. What an opportunity that is. Why don't you cherish it? Yunyang was not an ordinary person. Although he had only heard half of the conversation, he had already understood the whole story. They were obviously a pair of lovers, but because of the Demiurge Flawed Ten's identity as a whetstone, they were now separated by life and death. Luo Dajiang, on the other hand, looked like he had resigned himself to his fate. It was obvious that he did not want to hold Jiang Luoluo back, which was why he had reprimanded her harshly. In spite of this, if there was no deep love in his heart, it would be easy for him to abandon her after he had seduced her. In spite of this, he had held on, not even giving her a title. He was afraid that he would harm the person in front of him in a moment of impulse. Chapter 983. Luo Dajiang's parents watched helplessly from the side. Their faces were full of deep regret, and they wanted to say something but they did not. They had obviously seen this scene too many times. It was not that they did not know what to say, but they did not know how to speak. If they really spoke, who should they persuade and how could they persuade? They were stuck in a dilemma. Oh, it's Lady Jiang Luoluo? Yunyang laughed. It's the residence of 9 Supreme's honor to have Lady Jiang here. Please come in, please come in. Lady Jiang's gracious presence brings light to our humble dwelling. When I first saw Lady Jiang, I've wanted to have a friend like Lady Jiang. Please come in quickly. As he spoke, he gave Jiang Luoluo a look. Jiang Luoluo's expression changed as well as her eyes. She chuckled and said cheerfully, Greetings, Supreme Cloud. I Jiang Luoluo am pleased to meet you. Supreme Cloud, you're my friend from now on. We hit it off right from the start, friends of life and death. Yunyang laughed. That's right, that's right. We hit it off right from the start, friends of life and death. Lady Jiang, please come in quickly. Before Yunyang's words echoed in the air, Jiang Luoluo walked into the residence of 9 Supremes with her head held high and chest puffed out, ignoring Luo Dajiang. Luo Dajiang was anxious. Supreme Cloud, you. Jiang Luoluo, you can't come in. Jiang Luoluo said with her head held high, What did you say? What right do you have to say that? Didn't you hear that it was my good friend, Supreme Cloud, who invited me in? What does it have to do with you? Who are you to me? What right do you have to interfere with my freedom? I'm not here with you, I'm here to visit my good friend. Supreme Lord Cloud is my good friend. Luo Dajiang was speechless. Brother Luo, Yunyang's expression was still warm as he said slowly, Friends have come from afar, it's a must to be a good host. Let's talk about it later. Let's welcome you all tonight. He interrupted Luo Dajiang and welcomed Wu Minghuan and Luo Dajiang's family into the residence of 9 Supremes. Wu Minghuan, who had been watching from the side, suddenly wore a sincere smile. His expression relaxed as he laughed. Since it's a welcome, I wonder if there's wine? But is it enough? Of course there is, and it's good wine. There's definitely enough to drink. Great, great. Without another word, Wu Minghuan walked in with Yunyang, ignoring Luo Dajiang who was standing at the door in a daze. Luo Dajiang stood there blankly for a while, a look of relief flashing quietly in his eyes. He sighed softly and followed them. Her eyes snuck a peek at the red silhouette beside Yunyang, tenderness flashing in them. At this moment he was surprised to see Jiang Luoluo suddenly turn around and glare at him. Then, with a snort, she raised her head and walked forward arrogantly. Luo Dajiang's heart softened. How could he not see that the girl's eyes were brimming with tears just now? As she turned her head, the tears fell into the air. He could feel that the girl's mood had finally relaxed a little bit. Perhaps, the residence of 9 Supremes is the place that will truly change my fate. I hope it won't be a disaster because of my arrival, Luo Dajiang murmured in his heart. That night, in order to welcome Luo Dajiang and Wu Minghuan, Dong Qitian kindly gave them a night off and allowed the Demiurge Flawed Ten to reunite and drink. However, beautiful scenery never lasted long. After the feast, Luo Dajiang and Wu Minghuan began their journey to hell. That night, at the banquet table, a total of 12 people were completely drunk. Yunyang, Chen Duo, and the Demiurge Flawed Ten. Young Master of Dark Mist, Shirbujia, Traceless White Blade, Ren Qingquang, Triatom Swordsman, Shirwuchen, Yellow-Clad Sword of Frost, Lan Ruojuan, Purple-Robed Golden Needle, Wu Minghuan, Golden-Armed Scholar, Tai Qingcang Vicious Physician, Ping Xiaoyi, Star Soul Saber Man, Luo Dajiang, Serene Soul of Nine Springs, Kong Luoyue, and Eternal Sky Assassin, Guanuanyang. The Demiurge Flawed 10 had finally reunited after a long time. Each of them had their own experiences that they could not talk about, their untold sorrows and sufferings and their grievances. But when they gathered together this time, there wasn't a single person that spoke of their encounters after they parted, and all of them chose some interesting matters of the Jianghu to talk about. The room was filled with laughter and the atmosphere was extremely joyous. Towards the end, when the 10 of them were already tipsy, Wu Menghuan suddenly laughed and howled, saying hoarsely, "The sun and moon are no longer what they used to be. From now on, I'll never be a whetstone." The 9 of them were stunned when they heard him, then they shouted in unison, "All right, we'll never be a whetstone again." Yun Yang, who was sitting at the head of the table, looked indifferent as he said slowly, "I don't think there's anything wrong with being a whetstone." Once Yun Yang spoke, the 10 men glared at him in unison, their eyes glaring at him furiously. The humiliation of being a whetstone had been weighing on them for far too long. Now, someone actually said in front of them that there was nothing wrong with being a whetstone? To put it nicely, it was easy for him to say that, but to put it bluntly, it was a blatant mockery that was poking at their scars. However, the person who had spoken was Yun Yang. The Demiurge Flawed 10 were still very respectful towards Yun Yang, the leader of the residents of 9 Supremes. Although they were unhappy, they did not say anything in the end. In spite of this, the group's mood sank, no longer as excited as before. It was because these people had a good impression of Yun Yang. Chapter 984. It turns out that all of your achievements are exceptionally dazzling. Why do you think that you're whetstones then? Could it be that you've acknowledged yourselves as whetstones just because your opponents have made you into whetstones? Yun Yang smiled. From what I see, instead of saying that the sect disciples are using you as whetstones to train themselves, it's more like a bunch of whetstones colliding with each other. That's all. Tai Chingcang said, "A bunch of whetstones? Do you mean that not only are we whetstones but our opponents are as well? Can't you think so? While those people are using you as whetstones, aren't they becoming your whetstones at the same time as well? That's why I said that all of you are each other's whetstones. Doesn't this make sense?" Yun Yang asked. The 10 men were silent for a moment before they finally nodded in agreement. Yun Yang's words were not wrong. Since there are whetstones, what's a rock? What's a saber? Since all of you are each other's whetstones, it means that it's just a collision between rocks. Yun Yang said, "Then where's the real saber? Are they the saber in the end? Or are you the saber?" The 10 men fell into silence again, not speaking for a long time. No way. Are all of you starting to feel inferior again? It looks like all of you are too affected by the so-called whetstones. From what I see, at least at this stage, neither of you has the right to be called a saber. What all of you have shown so far is that you're just a rock that's harder. How can you say that you're sharp and invincible? Yun Yang said mercilessly, "They've long set their stance and used you all as whetstones, so they're already in an unbeatable state of mind. They're stuck in their own ways and naturally lost. Yet all of you are blaming yourselves and really see yourselves as whetstones. How can you not be defeated with this mentality alone?" Yun Yang's expression was amiable, his words meaningful and lingering. Lan Ruojuan pondered for a moment before asking respectfully, "May I ask, boss, what should we do?" Yun Yang said, "First of all, of course, we have to treat our hearts correctly and find our place from the root. Then we have to fight. Only when we have the heart of a powerhouse and know why we have to fight is the right path of cultivation. Do you understand? What all of you need to do now is to correct your state of mind during this period of time and sort out your strengths and weaknesses, as well as the flaws of your techniques. There are many cultivation books in our sect that can be used as reference so that your path of cultivation won't be rough anymore. This is the first. Secondly, I have to transform myself from a whetstone into an incomparably sharp blade in the upcoming hellish training. Only when you acknowledge the position of saber. Out, that out. Even if you can't transform yourself into a godly weapon in the end, even if you can only transform yourself into a hard saber embryo, there's still hope for you to shine. At least you're no longer the so-called whetstone, right?" Yun Yang paused for a moment before continuing, "What I hope to see is, from today onwards, all the celestial destinies elites in the martial world are all whetstones in your eyes, helping you to sharpen your blades as you move forward." Yun Yang's tone was as indifferent as ever, and his gaze was as calm as ever. If you still see yourself as a whetstone and join the residents of 9 Supremes only for a safe and secure place, then you'll be disappointed. It's the same here and there because the residents of 9 Supremes will only lead a batch of divine weapons to create new worlds and forge new glory. It's not a safe nest for whetstones to shine with the light. He stood up softly. I'll go back and rest first. Think about it carefully. Choose for yourselves who's right and who's wrong. Yun Yang turned and floated away. A long time after Yun Yang had left, everyone was still in a state of silence. What Yun Yang had said earlier had pierced into the hearts of all 10 of them from another angle. Everyone felt their divine souls trembling. That's right. Why am I destined to be a whetstone? Why can't others be mine? After a long time, Shi Wuchen sneered and said, the Demiurge Flawed 10 have been the whetstones in the eyes of the world for far too long. Not only the world, but even those of us who were directly involved have acknowledged their status as whetstones. I, Shi Wuchen, am utterly ashamed. Lan Ruojuan said shamefully, Boss, seems to be very disappointed in us. Ren Xingquang said, if it were me I'd be disappointed as well. We've spent so much effort only to recruit a bunch of stones. Who would be willing to lead a bunch of stones? Even if it's to build a stone city, they'd think that the material is not good enough. Wu Minghuan took a deep breath and said, so if I look at the world from a different perspective, this is how the clouds and mist are parted to reveal the clear sky. Why can't I, Wu Minghuan, use the world's heroes as my whetstones? Luo Dajiang guffawed and said loudly, I've decided. I want all the cultivators in the world to be my whetstones. Who knows, I might have to ask the 9 of you to be my whetstones in this short period of time. A sharp glint flashed across Guanyang's eyes. All the cultivators in the world except me are whetstones. That's right. All except me are whetstones. The 10 of them stood up and spoke in unison, their voices deafening. I'm going back to sleep. We'll continue the training tomorrow morning. Straighten your attitude. I'm going back too. I'll participate in the training tomorrow morning. Straighten my attitude. The 10 of them left in a single file. In spite of this, their mental state right now was like a different person compared to just now. The residents of 9 Supremes Hill had long been established, but other than Supreme Cloud, the rest of the 9 Supremes did not have a clear location. Therefore, everyone was temporarily staying in a big yard, including their families. The hill of the residence of 9 Supremes leader isn't a place anyone can enter. Without a position of Supreme, how can one have the face to enter a hill that will belong to someone else sooner or later? Luo Dajiang strode towards the yard where his family stayed. The other 9 people looked at him in surprise, not knowing what he was up to or what he was planning to do. Although his parents were in the family compound, there was still Jiang Luoluo. This guy used to avoid her like the plague and avoided her every day. Luo Dajiang came to the yard's door with a majestic gait and suddenly shouted, Jiang Luoluo, listen to me. As soon as he said that, everyone both inside and outside the courtyard jumped in fright. Jiang Luoluo, who was sitting in a daze before the lamp, was thinking about her uncertain future, about Luo Dajiang's refusal to accept her, and about the grievances she had suffered all these years. Her eyes were already rimmed red, just as she was lamenting herself, thinking that she would have to play the role of a shrewish woman for a long time in the future, constantly expressing her feelings and fighting for her own happiness. She could not help sighing. It was at this moment that she suddenly heard Luo Dajiang's shout, and she could not help but be shocked. Why did this fool, who felt that he had no future and was ashamed of his inferiority in front of her despite loving her deeply, suddenly go mad? She got up quickly and looked through the window, only to see Luo Dajiang standing tall in front of the yard's door. He seemed to be filled with an unprecedented majestic and domineering aura. She could not help but be shocked. Luo Dajiang roared, Jiang Luoluo, listen to me. From now on, I won't run away anymore. I want to marry you. I want to make you my wife. Chapter 985. Jiang Luoluo was shocked again when she heard that. Then she felt her face flush as if it was burning. Her wish had been fulfilled, but a string of tears streamed down her cheeks. The idiot was finally enlightened. The words that she had been waiting for, the words that she had yearned for, felt like she was in a dream. Jiang Luoluo, I'm not afraid of anything anymore. I don't care about anything anymore. You can stay here or go back to your sect. As long as your heart doesn't change, you are my wife. Stay here, and when the residence of 9 Supremes has a foothold, I'll marry you officially. It's the same if you go back to your sect. When the residence of 9 Supremes has a foothold, I'll go to your sect to marry you. If your sect doesn't allow it, I'll make you my wife even if I have to snatch you away. Luo Dajiang roared and roared, his voice shaking the clouds in the sky and dispersing them. Jiang Luoluo burst into tears. I know you can hear me. Luo Dajiang roared, I promise to marry you, I want to marry you. Jiang Luoluo covered her mouth tightly with her hands, a sweet smile blossoming at the corners of her lips, but tears streamed down her cheeks in a continuous stream. Luo Dajiang's majestic voice rang out, what right do I have to be an expert if I don't even dare to face my own feelings sincerely? From today onwards, from now on, I'll face everything in this world truthfully. The first thing I'll face is my own feelings. All the pressure, all the resistance, all the wind and rain, leave it to me. I'll shoulder it all. Jiang Luoluo covered her mouth and was about to rush out and throw herself into the thick embrace, snuggling up to each other. However, another loud roar came from outside. I'm going to sleep. Wait for me. I'm drunk today, but I'm not talking drunk nonsense. Jiang Luoluo stopped at the door, tears streaming down her cheeks, but she could not help but chuckle. This idiot. He's still the same idiot. The figure at the door turned and left, not staying any longer. Outside, the other members of the 9 geniuses were still making a ruckus, and the entire room was filled with chaotic noises that sounded like the howls of wolves. There were even a few fellows that blew their whistles loudly, fully displaying their true colors of hoodlums. *CK. Luo Dajiang, you're awesome. Why didn't I realize you were so awesome before? Luo Dajiang, I worship you. You're too awesome. Don't change, I have faith in you. Dajiang, you're too awesome. How domineering. As expected of my brother. Brothers support you. Let's just go to the bridal chamber tonight, alright? I support you. Guji Guji. Ah. Dong Qitin stood at the peak of the mountain, looking down at the bustling scene below. As he listened to the voices, a rare smile appeared on his cold face. The temperament of these 10 brats is really not bad. Once they understood, they immediately put it into action. However, Yun Yang was still the most incisive. As expected of the leader of a sect, to be able to dispel the demons in the hearts of 10 people in such a short period of time. It's like a blow to the head and a sermon to those who are lost. Looks like I have to work harder again. I need to put in more effort in the special training. The demiurge flawed 10 left in one go. Only one person was left at the table, which had been sitting neatly together. It was little fatty Chen Duo. The fats on Chen Duo's body jiggled, as if he was extremely agitated. He murmured, the demiurge flawed 10, who are known as the whetstones of the world's talents, now have the intention to use the whole world as their whetstone. What should I do? Am I really not as good as them? Am I not good enough? I want to join the special training too. As the major domo of the residence of 9 Supremes, this is a position that's second only to one and above all. How can I fall behind? I can't fall too far behind no matter what. I have to keep up with their footsteps. Even if I can't catch up to Boss Yun, I can't lose to those 10 idiots. Who's worse than who? I'll join the hellish training tomorrow morning as well. But I'll only be there for the morning. One needs to be persistent and act according to one's capabilities. I still have business to attend to in the afternoon. Earning resources is my main job now, little fatty told himself with determination in his eyes. The 10 of them use all the cultivators in the world as their whetstones. I'll use everyone who can earn money in the world as my whetstones. I want to earn more money than anyone else. Not only do I want to become an expert, but I also want the residents of 9 Supremes to replace the Tang family and become the wealthiest family in this world. Come on Chen Duo. You can do it, you can do it. Little Fatty's expression was unprecedentedly determined, his eyes gleaming with the luster of a spiritual jade. As time went by, the number of people in the residence of 9 Supremes increased. During this period of time, Little Fatty had been in constant contact with various human traffickers. The number of young boys and girls under the age of 10 that he had bought alone was more than 3,000. Including the original ones, the residence of 9 Supremes was close to 10,000 in terms of headcount alone. What made Yun Yang especially gratified was that many of the newly bought children had decent aptitudes. This meant that the money spent was not in vain. He then gave Little Fatty another large sum of spiritual jade. Go buy more. Especially those who provide disciples and resources to the various sections. Keep them at all cost. Also, don't forget to build a connection with these human trafficker organizations. Don't let any of them slip through the net in the future. Don't worry about money, don't feel the pinch at all. Yun Yang instructed. Yun Yang's last sentence seemed to be superfluous, but of course Little Fatty would not feel the pinch. The money spent, despite being huge, was only kept by these human trafficker organizations for a period of time. After a period of time, when they had found out the other party's background and started their operation, they would naturally take it all back. There was even the accumulation of these organizations over the years. In light of this, little Fatty was full of vigor and did not slack off at all. In the days that followed, it was basically 2 of the Demiurge Flawed 10 who followed little Fatty to train for half a day each day. The remaining half of the day and night were spent with little Fatty to do business, acting as bodyguards and spies. In the residence of 9 Supremes, all the children who came to the residence were given basic cultivation methods and a certain amount of cultivation resources. What Yun Yang did not lack at the moment was a large amount of spiritual jade. A certain amount of lower-class spiritual jade was enough to build a foundation for the children who had yet to cultivate their foundation. There was no need to spend more. It was only when a disciple who stood out from the crowd appeared that they would be given further training. As for the children who came to the residence of 9 Supremes, especially those bought from human traffickers, each of them knew that the cultivation opportunity before them was not easy to come by. Once they missed it, it would not come again. Not only did they escape their original tragic fate, but they also had the chance to cultivate. All of them cultivated with all their might, afraid that they would be eliminated by the residence of 9 Supremes. Later on, they learned that they could return home with a sum of money even if they were eliminated or choose to be a servant in the residence of 9 Supremes. However, since they had the chance to become a legitimate sect disciple, why would they want to be a servant? Chapter 986. Yun Yang was happy to see this happen. Without batting an eyelid, he set up a spiritual gathering formation with the ethereal amethysts at the children's living quarters. With such a large formation set within a small formation, the effectiveness increased by several times. The whistling spiritual energy gathered was cleansing the children's meridians and marrow every day, shedding their mortal bodies and changing their bones. On the other hand, those who were recruited by little Fatty in the beginning were sent away in batches because their talents were so poor that they could hardly cultivate. In spite of this, each of them had 100 gold taels for their journey home. To an ordinary person, this was already a considerable amount of wealth. As long as they did not act recklessly and squander without reason, they would be able to live a carefree life. In this way, the weeds were constantly eliminated and the gold was kept. Round after round of great waves washing the sand, all of it was carried out silently. Yun Yang and the Demiurge Flawed 10 were probably engrossed in Dong Qitian's training, so the raiders of all but God had temporarily stopped their activities. After all, time was running out. The Battle of the Celestial Banner was imminent. Although the residence of 9 Supremes was a newly established sect that had only been established for a few days, the entire sect was brimming with vigor. Everyone was seizing every second to cultivate and improve. The higher-ups were preparing to fight for the position of the 9 Supremes, while the disciples were gearing up to fight for the position of an inner disciple. Everyone was working hard, doing everything they could. Little Fatty continued to bring back a batch of children every 2 days. Sometimes he could even bring back 3 batches in a day. Yun Yang was impressed by his efficiency. To think that there would be so many human mediums in the Shenhuang world. This was truly unexpected and shocking. Fortunately, the residence of 9 Supremes was spacious enough that it could accommodate everyone, no matter how many people came. In spite of this, the children who came in batch after batch would never stay together. This was something Yun Yang had planned long ago. According to the time they came in, he had divided them into the first and second batches. It was now the 19th batch. Although Qian Duo was still bringing people back continuously, the interval between each batch had become longer. Obviously, the stock of human mediums nearby had been almost emptied by little Fatty. Keep sweeping. Yun Yang was acutely aware that this was the delicate moment when he was about to come into contact with these human mediums higher-ups or their base camp. These human mediums must have more high-level goods in their hands. As long as they continued to interact, they would be able to dig out the root. On this day, Dong Qitian went to Yun Yang and asked for a batch of heaven and earth resources. Are there any heavenly treasures left after exchanging with the spirit's grave? Give it to me if you have it. Dong Qitian was as blunt as ever, simple and crude. Yes. Yun Yang's answer was straightforward as well. Of course Yun Yang had one. The so-called exchange was just a smokescreen to fool the others. All the heavenly treasures he had obtained during this period of time were still in his hands. Whether it was from trading with the General Commerce League or from robbing the raiders of all but God, most of them were still around. Although Emmy was greedy for treasures of heaven and earth, its standards were getting higher and higher, and ordinary items were no longer worthy of its attention. What do you want? And I'm going to refine some pills. All right. Very straightforward. I'm not refining the pills for my own use, I'm refining them for those 10 fellows. These 10 fellows' meridians aren't flexible enough, so I have to refine some pills to increase their flexibility before they can consume pills that can elevate their cultivation base. If I forcefully elevate their cultivation base now, they'll be overwhelmed and explode. I have no objections even if I'm giving them to you for your own use. Feel free to use them, it's fine even if you refine them all into pills. You wish, child. I've agreed to train your subordinates, not to be your professional alchemist. Dong Qitian sighed and said, time is of the essence now, I have no choice but to do this. If I can't speed up those few children's improvement, you won't stand a chance in the battle of the Celestial Luck Banner half a year later. Yun Yang's eyes shone. If that's the case, I'll have to trouble you to only refine pills to elevate your cultivation base. I'll think of a way to improve the meridian's flexibility that you're worried about. I guarantee that all the dangers will be resolved without a hitch. Dong Qitian's eyes widened. Huh. The word hung was a clear indication of his distrust. Yun Yang snorted twice and rolled his eyes. Then he swaggered off without giving any explanation. How dare you not trust me? Why don't you think about the many old wounds and damaged meridians in your body? Who was the one who healed you? I can even easily heal the injuries that you've sustained for hundreds and thousands of years. What more the little burden you have now? What's there to talk about? Yun Yang was a man of action. That night, he used the Qi of Vitality to soften the meridians of the 11 men. Other than the Demiurge flawed 10, there was also a little fatty among the 11 men. When Dong Qitian saw the 11 men again the next morning, his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. How did you do it? Dong Qitian pressed. It was obvious that the scene had exceeded St. Lord Equal's knowledge. The 11 men spoke in unison. Boss has the medicinal pills, the best of the best. *CK. Dong Qitian expressed his dissatisfaction with Yun Yang's method. It's good enough to give them to the 10 of you. It's a waste to give them to this little fatty. Why give them to him? To make him fat? Why give them to him? Do you have so many medicinal pills that you don't have anywhere to put them? Qian Duo was exasperated by a certain someone's attitude. His mouth was agape and he was so angry that he could not speak. I'm so disliked. Just you wait, old man. When my cultivation base surpasses yours, I'll beat you up 8 times a day. Each of the men had a piece of ethereal amethyst in their hands. Outside, there were 108 pieces of ethereal amethyst to reinforce the mountain guarding formation. In addition, Yun Yang had spilled the ethereal amethyst inside the sect to build a second layer of spiritual gathering formation. The efficiency of their cultivation was unprecedented. After all, such a spiritual qi density was at least 20 times higher than other places with dense spiritual qi. In addition to the ethereal amethyst that each of them possessed and the fact that each of them were gifted geniuses, in addition to that, an old monster like Dong Qitian trained them with the ultimate heaven mystic method, the Qi of Vitality that strengthened their meridians' flexibility, and Dong Qitian's medicinal pills that enhanced their cultivation base. In summary, the 12 men's cultivation base had skyrocketed as if they had a cheat code. It was truly a new height and a new atmosphere every day. Yun Yang's cultivation base had broken through Saint Level 2 and reached beginner Saint Level 3 within these 10 days. It was a leap of 2 whole realms. The Demiurge Flawed 10's advancement was not any weaker than Yun Yang's. Without exception, all of them had advanced to Saint Level 3. With the cultivation base quality of the sect's upper echelon, it could be said that they had already surpassed ordinary lower-class Celestial Luck Banner sections. However, this was only limited to the quality of the sect's upper echelon cultivators. When it came to the cultivation base, ability and combat experience of the sect's disciples, they were at least worlds apart. Dong Qitian could see this clearly, but he could not do anything about it. They're all trash. How can we drag them out to fight head-on? Do they have a death wish? Do they have a death wish? Chapter 987. Early in the morning. The higher-ups of the residence of 9 Supremes, who had temporarily rested for a day, dragged Dong Qitian to the disciples' cultivation area. Before they entered, they could already hear the childish cries from within. These were the first batch of disciples who had entered the residence of 9 Supremes, the first batch of disciples who had started cultivating. Once Dong Qitian entered, his eyes widened again, almost popping out of their sockets. What am I seeing? Are these disciples still the trash I saw when I first arrived? Why are their bones and meridians so exquisite? What's going on? Although the innate aperture acupoints of these disciples didn't change much, the barrier of the aperture acupoints had become a lot thinner, and it wasn't just one or two, but many of the aperture acupoints had become thinner. Once the time was right, the innate aperture acupoints would definitely be greatly improved. Every disciple seemed to be full of spirit and energy like little wolf cubs full of fighting spirit, and revealed a ruthlessness from their bones. Whether it was the boys or the girls, all of them were cultivating diligently as if their lives depended on it. Although these disciples only practiced the most basic cultivation methods, and their moves were also the most common basic combat skills, but when they fought with each other, they were impressively orderly. This included the two little girls who were around 7 or 8 years old, who were fighting each other seriously with puffed cheeks. The fight was lively, advancing and retreating, neither giving way to the other. Dong Qitian rubbed his eyes. He wanted to wake himself up from the dream, but when he opened his eyes again, there were clearly no changes. Did this mean that this was reality? Was it real? Was it not fake? At the edge of the cultivation area, there were still many 17 or 18 years old youths, 20-something-year-old youths, and a small number of middle-aged men who were quietly carrying out the necessary security work. For example, they boiled water, applied medicine, soothed the children's muscles and bones, massaged their limbs, and some were cooking in full swing. These service personnel were probably the ones who had been eliminated. These people really did not have the talent to cultivate, but they were unwilling to leave the residence of 9 Supremes, so they automatically served the future disciples of the sect. It was obvious that everyone here cherished their days in the residence of 9 Supremes. No one wanted to leave. Young Yun, how did you do it? Dong Qitian had only asked, but he had already understood everything. Who was Dong Qitian? What kind of person was he? What kind of insight and knowledge did he have? He instantly sensed the difference in the spiritual qi here. The unusually rich spiritual qi of heaven and earth here was incomparable to the spiritual qi of heaven and earth where Yun Yang and the others were cultivating, but it was more delicate and gentle. It could be said to be the most suitable environment for those who had just started their cultivation journey. In addition, the spiritual qi concentration was not as good as Yun Yang and the others' cultivation ground. If the concentration of spiritual qi here were to be compared, it would be enough to defeat all the sects and families that did not have the celestial luck banner. What was more, Dong Qitian could even sense a spiritual qi whirlwind flowing in the field, moving back and forth gently. Cultivating in such an atmosphere reminded Dong Qitian of the spiritual cultivation land his master had painstakingly found for him, the spiritual wind valley of rebirth. Cultivating in the spiritual wind valley of rebirth required one to constantly be immersed in the spiritual wind that passed through the valley. Not only could the force of the spiritual wind wash the cultivator's meridians and cleanse the cultivator's bones, but it could also train the cultivator's skin, flesh, and bones. The spiritual wind valley was only effective for children below the age of 15. As for the atmosphere before him, the spiritual wind that was whistling back and forth was more than 10 times more active and frequent than the spiritual wind valley of rebirth. These children seemed to be undergoing marrow cleansing at every moment, being reborn and reborn. Every second. No, it was not just that. If he considered that these children were still fighting with their lives and training themselves with all their might, the effect would be even better with the help of the spiritual wind's cleansing. It was definitely not wishful thinking. Dong Qitian's thoughts raced. He had already made up his mind earlier. The so-called observation was merely a glimpse. What he had learned was shocking, but he did not delve into it. Now that he had taken a closer look, he was shocked to realize that a small portion of these children who were cultivating now had already reached the ultimate heaven sect standards for recruiting disciples. It was an unbelievable miracle. What was the ultimate heaven sect like back then? What was the residence of 9 Supremes now? How could there be such a bizarre situation? With extreme shock, Dong Qitian checked 19 similar locations in a row. The more he looked, the more shocked he became. It was truly a thrilling and shocking sight. All the locations were the same. There were at least dozens of such talented youths hiding in each location. Dong Qitian heaved a deep sigh after his inspection. He studied Yun Yang from head to toe like he was looking at a demon, not saying a word for a long time. Sure, Wuchen and the rest still had their cultivation base limited, and so did their eyesight. Naturally, they could not see the subtleties, but Dong Qitian could see it clearly and understood the deeper meaning behind it. If the residence of 9 Supremes continued to develop at this scale and at this speed, its rise was inevitable and unstoppable. As long as Yun Yang was not stupid enough to recklessly provoke a force that could not be defeated and completely crushed, the future of the residence of 9 Supremes would be smooth and unimpeded. Once it began to rise, it would be unstoppable, advancing at a tremendous pace. Dong Qitian asked himself honestly. Perhaps even the ultimate heaven sect back in the day did not possess such a heaven-defying foundation and ability. We can recruit the first batch of core disciples now. Dong Qitian exhaled deeply, suppressing the shock in him as he gave a suggestion about the sect's disciples for the first time. We can do it now? Yunyang was genuinely surprised. Indeed. Dong Qitian was speechless. Why does this child still look like he's not satisfied? What else do you want? Do you want to ascend to heaven? If you don't start recruiting core disciples, step up the training and teach them upper-level cultivation methods and techniques, all of you won't be able to make it to the Celestial Luck Banner competition half a year later. Actually, even if you start now, there might not be many who can be of use in the next half a year. Those who can fight are next to none at most. Where there's a will, there's a will. As long as there's a chance. Yunyang was as confident as ever. Dong Qitian was no longer completely disdainful. Instead, he felt like he was witnessing history, from nothing to something. The feeling excited him, and his condition was unprecedentedly good. I originally wanted to transform all these children into ethereal bodies and groom them so that their cultivation would be twice the result with half the effort. Yunyang was a little regretful. But now it's barely passable. Dong Qitian staggered and almost fell to the ground. The corners of his lips twitched as he said, "Why don't you die first? You can ascend to heaven directly and fall head first. That's the most satisfying thing. Today is another birthday, a solar birthday. Thank you all for your blessings. Today I didn't drink. During the meal my wife said, since so many brothers are here, why don't you have a drink? I rejected her sternly and righteously. I'm a man, I'll quit drinking when I say so. I can't drink no matter what." Everyone looked at me with admiration. My birthday was even better. Chapter 988. As for the white-robed, black-robed and blue-robed disciples that little Fatty had set up earlier, Yunyang had abolished all of them with a frown, ignoring them entirely. Little Fatty's plan was based on the old rules of various sects, imitating others and making a fool out of themselves. If Yunyang were to imitate everything, he would be suspected of being a traitor. It was better to deal with the current situation directly and think about the follow-up later. Everything in the residence of 9 Supremes was new, so there was no need to deliberately imitate the old bound of universe. Now, the residence of 9 Supremes will only recruit disciples. All of them will be dressed in white, and disciples who can fight will be selected to prepare for the Celestial Luck Banner contest. The ranks will be divided according to age for now, and after the contest, they will be ranked according to their combat strength and achievements. The one with the strongest cultivation base and outstanding battle achievements will be the current eldest senior brother of the residence of 9 Supremes. Such a customization was simple and crude. As for the future, after they become the 9 Supremes' inner disciples, their respective teachers will naturally decide on their assignments. The related clothing and miscellaneous items will also be dealt with in the future. The most urgent thing now is to work hard to improve your cultivation base and combat strength to face the Celestial Luck Banner contest. Everything else will give way. With this notice, all the children in the valley of the residence of 9 Supremes were stirred. Obviously, in the children's eyes, this notice was the real opportunity for all disciples to make a great leap. Sect Leader Master is finally accepting us into the sect. The Celestial Luck Banner contest this time is the opportunity for us to officially enter the sect. Under the command of the stewards, the children walked out neatly in rows, each of them puffing out their chests and standing straight. Their little faces were washed clean and brimming with youthfulness. Everyone was waiting to be selected, hoping that they could be selected. Dong Qitian's deific consciousness swept through the entire residence of 9 Supremes like it had descended from the sky, encompassing all the children. At this moment, his divine aura was like a prison, dominating the world. The more than 3,000 children present all felt a chill in their hearts, and a nervous and perturbed look appeared on their faces at the same time. It had begun. Can I be selected? Dong Qitian's deific consciousness surged like never before, displaying all the children's conditions in front of him. Looking at the nervous little faces, Dong Qitian actually felt an urge to laugh. Actually, regardless of whether it was the mobilization or coming out to line up, it was all just a formality. Even if all of these children stayed in the room to sleep, he would be able to accurately select them, eliminating the weak and keeping the strong, keeping the elites. Such a big fanfare was only for the sake of the future of the sect, deliberately creating such a grand ceremonial and solemn feeling. It really was like stealing a bell while deceiving one's ears. Dong Qitian looked at them row by row, looking at their spirits first. He felt that each of these little fellows had good spirits. Basically, each of them had a soaring vigor and a kind of ruthlessness. This kind of ruthlessness not only surprised him, but also somewhat moved him. This group of children is not bad. Just this spirit alone has already met my basic requirements. They are outstanding. Dong Qitian murmured and proceeded to pick those with better aptitude and physique, as well as those who could break through the limit of their chakras in the near future. At a glance, he found no less than 100 choices that met his requirements. There are so many. How can this be? Dong Qitian was shocked by his own discovery. Looking closely again, not only did he confirm that it was true, but he also felt a sense of reluctance. He could not bear to give up on this and that. He had picked them according to the ultimate heaven sect standards for selecting disciples, and yet he could not even eliminate a few? What was going on? The children from the first 6 batches especially, almost all of them were qualified. Each of them was pure gold and unpolished jade. They were worthy. I have to, no matter how reluctant I am. I can only choose the best of the best. Dong Qitian suppressed his thoughts and increased the selection limit according to Yun Yang's request, choosing 99 out of the best. This was the number that Yun Yang had stated earlier. However, it was precisely this head count of less than 100 that made Dong Qitian, a man who had always been decisive, suffer from a dilemma of choice. After some twists and turns, 99 people were finally selected. With a flash of red light, 99 children were selected from their respective groups and floated in the air, quietly drifting out and landing on the large square outside. The selection is complete. As soon as the 4 words were spoken, the remaining 2,000 children bit their lips tightly, tears glistening in their eyes. Their eyes were already red. In spite of this, they still stood strong, staring at the higher-ups of the sect who stood high above, their eyes filled with silent pleading. Are we going to be eliminated just like this? We can't accept this. We can't accept this. Today's Residence of 9 Supremes first selection ends here. Yun Yang's voice came slowly. The second selection will be held a month later. Only 99 people will be selected in each selection. Children, I've seen and remembered your efforts. The selection standard this time isn't to say that you're not as good as the chosen, but the quota is limited. I hope that you'll work harder and strive to enter the Residence of 9 Supremes in the next selection. The children relaxed a little when he said this. However, they were still far from being completely relaxed. These children who came from the lowest rung of society were determined, smart, hardworking, and sensitive at the same time. They knew very well that the sect leader's words were meant to comfort them. The 99 people selected this time must be the best of the best, the best of the best. They must be better than them or perhaps even better than them. Although they were not sure in which aspect, they must be better than them in some way. What they had to do next was to cultivate harder, be more serious in doing things, and be more attentive in comprehending. Next time I must be selected. On the other side, facing the 99 children who had been selected through layers of selection, Shi Wuchen's voice was unusually solemn. Chapter 989. Shi Wuchen's faint voice, laced with an inexplicable indifference, echoed in the air and in the hearts of the disciples. 99 pairs of bright black eyes stared at him nervously, all of them holding their breaths without blinking. They seemed to have made up their minds. No matter how hard and tiring it is, we will never be replaced. All of you follow me. Shi Wuchen did not waste any more words, walking ahead slowly. After a while, he said, when you enter the 9 Supremes Hall, report your names one by one and swear to join the Residence of 9 Supremes without regrets in this life. Another moment later, the children's crisp yet deafening swearing came from the 9 Supremes Hall on the mountain peak. We are fortunate to enter the Residence of 9 Supremes today and become its disciples. We will not regret this life, we will not betray this life. The young and tender voices converged into bolts of spring thunder, rolling across the sky for a long time without stopping. The thunder of the heavenly path fell with a crash. Below, there were still thousands of children standing solemnly in the same place. Their eyes shone with longing as they looked enviously at the place where the voice came from above the clouds. Those were all his companions and they were already one step ahead of him. We must work harder to catch up no matter what. We also have to make an oath above the clouds. We want to tell the world loudly that we will not regret joining the Residence of 9 Supremes in this life. You're saying that these children were actually bought from human traffickers? Many of them were not even prepared for sex with celestial luck banners? Dong Qitian clicked his tongue in wonder. That's right. These children are so talented. How could no one be interested in them? Even if one or two of them are blind, it's impossible that all of them are. Preposterous. Preposterous. Of course, this is not their original talent. In fact, before they came to the residence of 9 Supremes, their original talent was only average. Just like what you saw when you first arrived. Huh. You mean that the residence of 9 Supremes has a way to enhance a person's innate talent in a short period of time? With such an immediate effect and godlike effect, it can benefit many people and be used repeatedly? I didn't say that. Senior, don't put me on the fire to roast. I understand. I won't ask. According to what you've said, there isn't even a single rich disciple among the residents of 9 Supremes' disciples now? Dong Qitian asked. The residence of 9 Supremes is just a newly established one. I don't want any trouble. This is not a matter of trouble. Most of the children of rich families would have their meridians cleansed from birth at the expense of their elders. This starting point was something that the children under him could not compare to. As the saying goes, the poor are scholars while the rich are martial artists. This makes sense. How could I not know this? But the children of rich families also have many problems. Yun Yang was unmoved, replying indifferently, especially when we don't have much capital to attract them now. There's no need to go through the trouble of recruiting manpower, it's half the result with twice the effort. What about the future? In the future? Yun Yang looked at Dong Qitian mockingly. It's even less necessary in the future. Once the residence of 9 Supremes gains a firm foothold and obtains the celestial luck banner, the spiritual chi density of our sect's base will definitely double or triple. I mean, on top of what we have now. When that time comes, it'll only be easier for this place to produce genius disciples in batches. Since it can be done without external help, why do I need those so-called geniuses in the secular world? Yun Yang looked at the faces of the children in the residence of 9 Supremes, his expression gentle as he said faintly, although these children in front of me have suffered a lot, they've learned a lot about the fickleness of human nature and the cruelty of the world. They know more about the cruelty of the world than anyone else, so they'll cherish everything they have now and do their best to protect what they have. I'm willing to brighten their future. I believe that their tolerance for suffering and pain is definitely much stronger than many children of the same age who have not experienced similar experiences. The hardships they've gone through may not be compensated in this world, under the heavens. But I'm willing to give them a chance. A bright future, a position above the clouds, is the chance I can give them. Yun Yang smiled and said, as long as they work hard, they'll have a glorious tomorrow. Dong Qitian was silent for a long time before he finally sighed deeply and said, your thinking is a little biased, even extreme, but I have to admit that you have a point. Yun Yang said, from what I see, this is an unbreakable truth. How is it extreme? Dong Qitian said, why don't you tell me directly why you're doing this? Yun Yang looked at the horizon and said, it's just that everyone shares the same heart and the same principle. Since I was born until now, I've been an orphan for more than 20 years. The flash of desolation in his eyes made Dong Qitian's heart skip a beat. He suddenly understood the source of Yun Yang's motivation and the true meaning behind his actions. Rich kids cry when they're scolded, they cry when they fall, they cry when they're bullied, they cry when their toys are snatched away, they cry when they're hurt, they cry when they're hungry. And as long as they cry, there's someone to comfort them. Yun Yang pointed down and said softly, but these kids are abducted and bullied. They live in a high-pressure environment every day. They're in pain every moment but they rarely cry. Because they know that it's useless to cry. No one will comfort them because they cry. Instead, they'll be beaten up even more because they cry too much. They're getting used to it. Even if they're bitten by a dog, they can only wrap it up with tears in their eyes. When they're beaten, they can only grit their teeth and bear it without shedding a single tear. I've rarely cried since I was young. I'm the same as them because we all know that it's useless to cry. Since it's useless, what's the point of crying? Yun Yang lifted his head and said, the reason I'm willing to give them a chance is that I hope their future will be like mine. They'll keep their tears in their hearts and laugh freely in the face of this world, the martial world, and conquer it. Only this is the residence of 9 Supremes in my heart. The true residence of 9 Supremes? Dong Qitian ruminated on Yun Yang's words. He had a feeling that his feelings, or rather Yun Yang's actions, must have their original intentions. However, it was obvious that Yun Yang was unwilling to speak of it. Yun Yang's gaze was fixed on the void, as if the faces of the 9 Supremes brothers were floating before his eyes. We're all from the lowest rung of society. We know our pain. So, If we conquer the world in the future and Yutong rules over the world, then, no matter who it is, we must remember to give more support to the children of the lowest rung. They're suffering too much. And there's no hope. If we don't give them hope when the time comes, what's the point of us fighting for our entire lives? Yun Yang's eyes were shining. He murmured, "Hope? I'll give." Chapter 990. The residents of 9 Supremes had chosen a total of 99 children for the first time. It seemed like a lot in terms of head count, but the residents of 9 Supremes taught disciples according to their respective peaks. If they were to be distributed evenly among the 9 peaks, there would only be about a dozen of them in each peak. Moreover, there was the central peak that was connected to Supreme Cloud's first peak. Not only was it not a lot when 99 people were distributed, it was actually very limited. Because the quality of this batch of disciples was already the best of the best, each of them was talented, there was no need to deliberately compete with each other. They were all brought back to their respective peaks by the deacons of their respective peaks, waiting for the peak master to teach and train them. However, there was another problem that had to be solved, and it was extremely urgent. The 9 peak masters had not been decided yet. Yun Yang decided at once that it was time to decide the positions of the 8 Supremes in the residence of 9 Supremes other than himself. Yun Yang's initial plan was to determine the positions of the 9 peak leaders based on their merits and cultivation base after dealing with the human traffickers. However, the situation had changed and his plans could not keep up with the changes. It was too late to follow his original plan. The competition of the 9 peaks shall begin tomorrow morning to determine the residence of 9 Supremes. Yun Yang made a prompt decision. Brothers, be prepared. Yun Yang's decision had stirred up a storm among the Demiurge Flawed 10, causing a commotion. Shi Wuchen and the other 10 began to rub their palms in unison, full of pride and eagerness. Their gazes scanned the others maliciously as they turned their necks and flexed their wrists, chuckling sinisterly. Their behavior was extremely creepy. Shi Wuxia chortled, "Hee hee," Shi Wuchen chortled, "Ha ha ha," Ren Qinghuang chortled, "Hee hee," Lan Ruojuan chortled, "Hee hee," Wu Minghuan chortled, "Hee hee," Tai Qingsang chortled, "Hee hee," Ping Xiaoyi chortled, "Hee hee," Luo Dajiang chortled, "Wah," Kong Luoyue chortled, "Hee hee." The last one, Guanuanyang, did not have a unique laugh to choose from, so he twisted his waist and moaned, "Hee." Kong Luoyue and Guanuanyang's moans sent chills down everyone's spines. They looked at Kong Luoyue and Guanuanyang as if they were looking at 2 perverts. It was too scary. Yun Yang and Dong Qitian exchanged glances, secretly rejoicing that the 99 disciples had been sent to the 9 peaks. If they were still here and heard about Kong Luoyue and Guanuanyang's behavior, it was guaranteed that no one would choose them as their master. Furthermore, Yun Yang dared not put them in an important position even if they were chosen. Disciples who could voluntarily enter the tutelage of such people must have an unusual psychological quality. It was better to take unnecessary risks. Yun Yang waited for a moment to let the awkward atmosphere pass before he said seriously, "The residence of 9 Supremes, as the name suggests, only has 9 Supreme-level leaders to make the name of the 9 Supremes complete and legitimate. However, there are 10 of them among the Demiurge Flawed 10 alone. I believe everyone has already made up their minds about the difference, so I shall not elaborate further. As for who can become one of the 9 Supremes, it will depend on one's own ability. Therefore, everyone must be prepared. Once the winner is determined, it will be the final verdict." The 10 men guffawed. Of course, we're the residents of 9 Supremes, not the residents of 11 Supremes. Putting aside Boss Yun's position as the lead Supreme, the other 8 positions should be taken by those who are capable. What right do those who are inferior have to covet it? The competition will be swift. If it were up to me, eliminating Ping Xiaoyi and Shi Wuchen is exactly what everyone wants. Yes, eliminating Shi Wuchen and Ping Xiaoyi will save time and effort. It'll be satisfying. Ping Xiaoyi was enraged. What do you mean by what everyone wants? Of course I'm happy to see Shi Wuchen eliminated, but why do you have to bring me along? Who have I offended? Is there any justice in this world? Shi Wuchen was even more enraged. How can all of you talk like this? Especially you, Ping Xiaoyi. What do you mean you're happy to see Shi Wuchen eliminated? Are you guys even talking like a human being? It's not certain who will be eliminated. The position of the 2nd Supreme of the 9 Supremes is mine, Shi Wuchen. No one can take it away. Give it a try if you don't believe me. Let's see who's the real deal. The men sneered. Let's give it a try. Let's see who's the real deal. That's right. No matter who's eliminated, just give him a job. What right does he have to make a fuss if he's inferior? The 10 men looked relaxed and excited as if they were eager to fight. They were brimming with confidence and did not take it seriously. Before the competition, I have something to say. Yun Yang enunciated each word clearly. This competition between brothers is only for the position. It's normal not to give in and not to show mercy, but remember to hold back. There must be no casualties. Besides, no matter who's eliminated from the 9 Supremes position in the end, there must be no resentment. If you're willing to bet, you must be willing to lose. This must be made clear in advance, lest a grudge arises later on. It's not something I'd like to see. The 10 men guffawed. Don't worry about this, boss. We, the Demiurge Flawed 10, still have this much breadth of mind. If there's anyone who can't afford to lose, just leave. Alright, let's cut the nonsense. Go back and get ready. Tomorrow morning at the Central Peak Square, the Supreme ranking will officially begin. Alright. When Yun Yang announced the selection of the 9 Supremes the next day, the Bound of Universe was suddenly stirred up by a piece of news that stirred up a storm. The Celestial Luck Banner Tournament, the battle for the Celestial Luck Banner, is about to officially begin. All sects who wish to compete for the Celestial Luck Banner must complete the registration within half a month. Those who fail to register within the time limit will be disqualified from the battle for the Celestial Luck Banner. The symbol of the Bound of Universe's Celestial Luck Banner Tournament, the Bound of Universe's Celestial Luck Banner Tournament, had appeared in the world. Thousands of mountains and valleys were stirred because of this order. The fateful moment had arrived as scheduled. Countless sects immediately sent out the highest order of their sects, ordering all their disciples who were traveling in the martial world to return immediately. Prepare for war. The heaven and earth were plunged into an unprecedented solemn atmosphere. Early morning. The battle for the residence of 9 Supreme ranking had officially begun. 10 men emerged in a single file, brimming with a strong will to fight and an unparalleled aura. For a moment, the overwhelming will to fight wreaked havoc above the residence of 9 Supremes, stirring the wind and clouds. Looking at their brothers opposite them, their eyes were burning with fire and their demeanor was insolent. Dong Qitian, the chief instructor, naturally became the judge. Yun Yang and Little Fatty were only responsible for watching the show and waiting for the final result. Of course, Little Fatty Chen Duo was really just there to watch the show. Yun Yang, on the other hand, had to make his own judgment on these 10 men based on his own observation, including the positions they would hold in the future and which aspect of the sect they would be responsible for. He had to draw a conclusion based on today's observation. Chapter 991. The rules of the 9 Supremes this time were simple. 10 people would be divided into 5 groups and would draw lots to decide who would fight in the first round. Once the first round was over, there would naturally be 5 winners and 5 losers, and the winner would advance. In the second round, the 5 people in the winners group would draw lots again. 4 of them would fight in 2 rounds and the last person would be on standby. When the second round was over, the winners of the 2 rounds would naturally advance, while the one who would be on standby would draw lots to fight one of the 2 losers in the second round. In the end, there would be 3 candidates for the final battle. In the third round, these 3 candidates would take turns to kill each other, and the strongest would be the second Supreme that everyone yearned for. The second Supreme of the residence of 9 Supremes would be the second Supreme. Under the second Supreme, the other 2 candidates would be the third and fourth Supreme based on their battle results. The remaining people would continue to draw lots and fight again, deciding the 5th, 6th, 7th and 9th Supreme positions. Excluding the 2 people who ranked last, the order of the residence of 9 Supremes was more or less decided. The remaining 2 would take up other positions in the residence of 9 Supremes, such as the disciplinary hall, the combat hall, or something else. It had to be said that the rules were really easy. They could be seen clearly with just a glance. No one doubted whether there was an element of luck in this, because luck was a very important component of a cultivator's overall ability. There was even an ancient saying that was deeply rooted in people's hearts. When luck comes, the city wall can't stop it. Even pigs can fly. Shi Wuchen was the first to step up. I'll go first. He stood up with a belly full of rage. Don't all of you dislike me? I'll be the first to draw lots. Let me tell you, no matter who I draw, I won't show any mercy. Just you wait. The 9 people were not offended when they heard him, but laughed in unison. Who wants you to show mercy? You'd better worry about yourself. Shi Wuchen snorted angrily and strode forward. With a stretch of his hand, he drew a name without hesitation, opened it and guffawed. Kong Luoyue. Come out and call me big brother. Kong Luoyue leaped out furiously, rubbing his palms together. I was just about to teach you a lesson, you bastard. Subsequently, Shi Bujia drew Tai Qingtsang, Ren Xingquang drew Guanyuanyang, Lan Ruojuan drew Wu Minghuan, and Luo Dajiang was naturally matched with Ping Xiaoyi. As soon as the result came out, Luo Dajiang's face twisted. The others also looked at him with gloating expressions. Among these people, the one they were least willing to make an enemy out of was probably Ping Xiaoyi. This guy was known as the Vicious Physician, and it was definitely not a nickname that he would rather brag about himself. He truly lived up to his name. His entire body was filled with poison, and even if one's cultivation was higher than his, they would still fall into his trap if they were not careful. The others breathed a sigh of relief when Luo Dajiang drew Ping Xiaoyi for his first match. After all, the first round of the battle was directly linked to the ranking of the Venerables. Once they lost, they would no longer be able to obtain a higher position. The initial plan for the 5 matches in the first round was to start at the same time, but Yun Yang had suddenly changed his mind when the matches were about to begin. Let's fight them one-on-one. We still have time, Yun Yang said. Everyone can learn from your own battles and familiarize yourselves with each other's fighting style. I believe that we'll have a clear idea of what to do when we work together later on. Everyone nodded in agreement, thinking that it was reasonable. Dong Qitian was the only one who turned to glance at Yin Yang, a faint hint of approval flashing across his eyes. The first 2 to start the battle were Shi Wuchen and Kong Luoyue. The 2 brothers who had been through life and death jumped out at the same time. Shi Wuchen's weapon was naturally the triatom sword that he had been famous for a long time, while Kong Luoyue's weapon was not the long sword he had used in the previous battle. Instead, it was replaced by 2 strange weapons that looked pitch black. The 2 weapons were shaped like 2 sharp awls, the tips of the weapons filled with strange patterns of sharpness. Kong Luoyue said faintly, Shi Wuchen, you're out of luck today. I've never presented these 2 weapons in my hands to anyone before. They're called the Hidden Soul Spikes. Not only are they sharp and dangerous, but they also have hidden mechanisms within them. There are countless hidden soul spikes that could appear at any time. It's impossible to guard against them. He smiled faintly. So, Shi Wuchen, you must be very careful. Be very careful. Don't cry about how unfair it is when you've been tricked by me. Shi Wuchen was enraged, pointing his sword at Kong Luoyue. What nonsense are you spouting? Come up and receive your beating. During this period of time, the other 9 people had been singling out Shi Wuchen. Just because he was 1 step ahead, Shi Wuchen's heart was already on the verge of exploding. This time, it was a legitimate opportunity for Shi Wuchen to retaliate. Of course, he wanted to vent his frustrations. Moreover, he still had the trump card that his boss had specially prepared for him. Do you really think that my triatom sword is still the same triatom sword? Shi Wuchen was confident that victory was within his grasp and that he would succeed in every endeavor. Dong Qitian was initially nonchalant. After all, to his actual level, the duel between 2 saint-level cultivators was not a battle of life and death. It was merely a competition between the same sect, so he was not too interested. However, after taking a look at the duo's aura and the surging battle intent, his expression turned into one of focus. With his cultivation base, there was no need for him to pay too much attention to the details of the battle as the referee for a duel of this level. Even if there were any accidents, they could be easily resolved. Although the slightest difference could decide the outcome of a battle at Shi Wuchen and his companion's level, even if it was not a battle of life and death and only a matter of victory, there would still be earth-shattering noises and danger looming at any moment. Dong Qitian still did not need to pay too much attention. At most, he dared not be too careless. However, with Shi Wuchen and his companion's movements, the aura and battle intent far exceeded the atmosphere of a battle between ordinary saint-level cultivators. It made Dong Qitian more serious and concerned. Why are these 2 people's auras so strong? Yun Yang, on the other hand, paid close attention to the duo's gaze and expression, especially the subtle movements that did not belong to the battle. Dong Qitian's job was to judge the outcome of the battle and stop it at once if there were any accidents. Yun Yang, on the other hand, wanted to judge the character and temperament of the people before him, as well as their mentality to win or lose in the grand scheme of things. Although the strength of an individual's cultivation base and the outcome of today's battle were important as they would affect everyone's status in the residence of 9 Supremes in the future, it was unavoidable to place too much emphasis on them. On the contrary, character and temperament were the key to success. With a clear whistle in the field, both men moved at the same time and engaged in battle. The sword in Shi Wuchen's hand was waved abruptly, and a desolate aura of 3 autumns surged abruptly and spread rapidly. It was the 3rd month of spring, the season of early spring, when the grasses were long and the nightingales were in flight. However, as Shi Wuchen's sword light flashed, the spectators could clearly feel a sense of autumn. Autumn was cool, desolate. The sky was high and the clouds were thin. Chapter 992. Seeing that Shi Wuchen was going all out right from the start, Kong Luiyue was not to be outdone. With a flip of his hands, the 2 pitch-black dark soul spikes, one above and the other below, reflected a faint glow. His entire being seemed to have melted into the darkness, a stark contrast from the pervading autumn air. It was as if he was a ghost, blending into the night like water and milk, as if it was made by nature. Only the 2 spots of dim light were like the last embers in the darkness, flickering without end. In the next moment Shi Wuchen leaped into the air, his long sword gleaming in the air. A chilly aura of autumn sliced through the air like a waterfall and came crashing down. In the process of its descent, a whistling autumn wind was generated, sweeping through the surroundings. Halfway through the move, the sword gleam turned into autumn rain that poured down from the sky, shrouding the entire area. It was an indiscriminate attack that covered a large area. As the saying went, an expert's skill would be known the moment he made his move. The Demiurge Flawed 10, who had been clamoring to kick Shi Wuchen out of the 9 Supreme sequence, looked unprecedentedly solemn when they saw Shi Wuchen's move. They did not expect Shi Wuchen's swordsmanship to have reached such a terrifying level, far exceeding their initial estimation. The sword intent was abundant. It was only then that Shi Wuchen's voice rang out leisurely, "Kong Luiyue, you think too highly of yourself because you have a trump card. I'd like to see how many strikes you can take from me. This is the first strike of my melancholy desolation swordsmanship. Autumn comes after the summer. I'm not afraid to tell you that the name of this move is Beginning of Autumn." Kong Luiyue's expression remained the same. His body swayed and turned into a cloud of hazy fog like a ghost, pulling a distance of 100 feet in an instant. Ghostly fog rose around him. The 2 black gleams surged forward, one above and one below. Halfway through their journey, they turned into 2 long black rivers, one high and one low. They surged and surged, the waves surging and surging. Finally, they soared into the sky and blocked the autumn rain and wind, as if they intended to go against the trend and launch a massive counterattack. At the same time, a cold voice rang out at the same time, "The gates of hell open, the netherworld river comes." With 2 soft clanging sounds, the autumn intent and the ghost fog that filled the air rose again. The area within 100 feet of where the 2 were fighting suddenly expanded to a space of 500 feet. There was also a figure in green who shot up into the sky. It was Shi Wuchen. He was one with his sword, and his body and sword became one. He soared into the sky at an incredible speed. As Shi Wuchen's sword light soared into the sky, 2 more spots of dim light chased after it from below. It was as if the Nether River was mixed with 2 spots of dim light that had never been extinguished since ancient times, and its power was even greater than before. Everyone's eyes were focused on the sword light that was rapidly rising to the sky. It transformed into many cold stars that fell in a fan shape. Halfway through, the cold stars had already turned into white frost that filled the sky. 10,000 layers of autumn dew and frost. "Take this, my white dew." Seeing that another vicious move was coming, the raging Nether River rolled back abruptly. Kong Luiyue let out a long howl as his black silhouette shot out diagonally like an arrow. Although he was evading at top speed, the 2 beams of cold light in his hands changed direction and collided with Shi Wuchen's autumn intent sword again. Home viewing platform, 1 look back. Home viewing platform, 1 look back again. Home viewing platform, 1 step back 3 times. The ghost-like dark soul spike surged again and again, turning into the Nether River that flowed against the current. The waves rolled into the sky and a large amount of ghost fog rose into the air. Its momentum seemed to be even stronger than Shi Wuchen's autumn intent sword. Dong Qitian shook his head as he watched. Yun Yang frowned as well, and the rest of the Demiurge Flawed 8 looked regretful as well. At this point, the outcome of the battle was already decided. Kong Luiyue was at a complete disadvantage. Although the current situation was still stable and Kong Luiyue's 3-move combo had given him a slight advantage, what was the actual situation? Shi Wuchen had only used 2 moves so far, Beginning of Autumn and White Dew of the Tri-Autumn sword style. He had yet to use the mid-autumn and late-autumn moves, but Kong Luiyue had already countered with 4 moves. The current situation was one thing, but in terms of their respective trump cards, Kong Luoyue had fallen into an extremely passive position. Dong Qiqian and Yun Yang were not the only ones who could see it clearly. The rest of the Demiurge Flawed 10 were well aware of it as well, having a general judgment of the battle. As expected, Shi Wuchen's sword light flashed. It was not only the sword light that was initially descending, but sword light surged up from the ground as well, forming a converging force that attacked from above and below. Then, another cold glint shot out from the gap between the top and the bottom, attacking Kong Luoyue forcefully. Heaven and Earth in Autumn Division. Take this, my Autumn Division. The cold glint was born from the converging sword of Heaven and Earth. Not only did it penetrate Kong Luoyue's ghastly fog, it was also aimed at Kong Luoyue's throat. However, the unparalleled sword suddenly slowed down at the last moment before it hit Kong Luoyue. The tip of the sword drooped a little, deviating from its initial landing point. Kong Luoyue had been crossing the hidden soul stab, trying to focus his attack. A menacing ghost head was not formed and he did not have enough energy to gather. It was the slight delay that gave him a chance to turn the situation around, despite it being only a millimeter's difference. His eyes glinted as he sucked in a mouthful of chi at the last moment. The skull that had already been formed dissipated abruptly as he hollered, "Come, let's go for it." The hidden soul stab met the attack head-on, colliding with the triatom sword in the most direct and violent way. There was a loud explosion and green robes fluttered as Shi Wuchen flipped and landed lightly on the ground. On the opposite side, Kong Luoyue staggered 30 feet back and staggered, swaying for quite a while. There was a flash of relief in Shi Wuchen's eyes. Kong Luoyue managed to steady himself and looked up with a bitter smile. "I've lost?" Shi Wuchen was silent for a moment before he said, "You haven't even used the hidden soul stab. Aren't you upset about admitting defeat?" Kong Luoyue retorted angrily, "Stop acting like you've won. You're in the game so you know the outcome. You're just a little stronger than me now, so what? So what if I use the hidden soul stab? You'll be heavily injured and I'll die." Shi Wuchen laughed and said, "Brother, I owe you a favor." Kong Luoyue pursed his lips and said, "Do I care?" Before his voice trailed off, he had already kept the hidden soul stab in his hand and vanished in a twirl. He turned to walk back and said loudly, "See, I've lost. Itua is so much stronger than before? There's no justice in this world." The rest of the Demiurge Flawed 10 guffawed. "You can't even beat Itua and you still have the cheek to talk." The scene immediately burst into an uproar and everyone laughed and joked for a while. There was a smile on Yun Yang's face, comforted. In terms of victory and defeat, Shi Wuchen undoubtedly had the upper hand. Everyone could see that. However, if it was a battle of life and death, Kong Luoyue might not necessarily be at a disadvantage. Once the hidden soul stab was used, the worst outcome would still be Shi Wuchen heavily injured and Kong Luoyue defeated. The other outcome, which was more likely, was to perish together, hand in hand. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.